The modern Five Nights at Freddy's lore and timeline has been expanding for the last 6 years now, which is just insane to think about when considering all the new characters and games since then that fans have just loved. I would even argue that the modern lore was a soft reboot to the franchise, bringing in an entirely new side to the lore and timeline that a lot of us grew up with and remember, that is now being known as the Mimic Arc. But 6 years later, have we solved the modern timeline? Have we solved every single new mystery that has caused debates on top of debates? Have we truly been able to understand what this modern story was trying to tell us? Well, in this combined retrospective video, join me as we cover every single FNAF game or DLC from the modern timeline and whether or not we've solved them. Today we'll go over mystery by mystery, deciding which ones are solved, kinda solved, and unsolved, while also deciding what mysteries are still left from these games, which all accumulates to answering one question: have we solved the modern Five Nights at Freddy's lore 6 years later? Well, my name is Bronze Films, and not only will this video combine all retrospective videos from the channel, but there will also be all new content that includes bonus mysteries that weren't in the original videos, discussions about the future of FNAF and where FNAF should go next, and brand new collabs from your favorite creators. So please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and let's get started with the first game to the modern timeline, Help Wanted. To set the scene, like I said, Help Wanted was essentially the soft reboot for the franchise, and there was a lot of pressure that came with this game since it was released after Pizzeria Simulator and Ultimate Custom Night, two games that fans regard as the perfect ending to the absent era of the timeline, so what would come after would have a lot to live up to, and man did they deliver. We got our first teaser on March 11, 2019 when Scott Cawthon posted this image of the corner of the main key art for this game of an amalgamation of characters. 2 weeks later, Scott would post his final complete key art alongside the very first teaser trailer released by PlayStation. Here we saw different monitors displaying different levels from the game, with the main monitor showcasing FNAF 1. At the end we also got jump scares for a few animatronics, and really this teaser gave us the title that told us we were getting a virtual reality FNAF game, Five Nights at Freddy's VR Help Wanted. From here we would get teaser images of different levels and details from the game, until finally on May 28th, Help Wanted would finally be released alongside a launch trailer that showcased gameplay with different levels, animatronics, and really just showed us what a VR FNAF game would look like. But although this was an entirely new FNAF experience, we still had tons of lore that would be the foundation to the rest of the games and stories released after this one. So to give you a recap of all of the lore, here's mini bite games who you should totally check out after this video.
Help Wanted. Even before the release of the VR experience, the lore was being drip fed to us through little game teasers. The first teaser, released on March 11th, 2019, seemingly just showing off a blob of animatronics for the cover, actually gave us 3 hidden lore texts. Don't listen to them. We let something inside. Remember Jeremy. At the same time as Scott Games updated with this original teaser, the source code revealed links to some very interesting images. Most of them were gameplay screenshots from different parts of the game. However, one of these teasers was not like the others. Instead of an in-game screenshot, this final teaser, named ORGN, seemed to show an endoskeleton head. The best guess for these teasers from Game Theory was that we'd be playing as technicians, the same technicians that died at the hands of Ennard. They predicted that this was the head of Ennard, and that we'd be working to do tasks around the different Freddy's locations from the past. Did this theory hold up? Finally, on May 28th, 2019, Help Wanted released to immediate praise from both new and old fans. The combination of virtual reality and FNAF's original iconic gameplay was the perfect mixture for an amazing first game from Steel Wool. But us theorists don't care about that. No, we're here for the lore. So let's boot up our VR headsets and start from the top. Once the game starts and you hit the continue button, Hand Unit begins to speak, welcoming you to the Freddy Fazbear virtual experience. He goes on to mention Fazbear Entertainment's bad reputation from previous events. Luckily, Hand Unit dissuades any concern by telling us that most of these horrible events were total fabrications from the mind of a complete lunatic. As a result, Fazbear Entertainment has decided to create this VR experience to recreate these obviously fake scenarios and move on from the spooky tales of the past. With that introduction out of the way, we are teleported to the main hub for the game. Set in some version of a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, we are provided with a minigame terminal. Beat the available 39 levels and you unlock the final option on the terminal, Pizza Party. This level is different from the rest. The environment is a mix match of all the previous levels with no clear goal besides don't be late. When you make your way to the end of the maze, you find yourself behind the stage at Freddy's. And hey, lucky you! Your favorite cake and pizza are here for you to enjoy with the Fazbear Band. Soon, however, a mascot form of Spring Bonnie lures you over to the stage, where the screen fades to black and you wake back up. You are now the star of the show, Freddy Fazbear, stuffed into a suit by the same rabbit who now dances to your performance as the credits roll. But, as most of you likely know, this isn't the end of the game. Hidden throughout the minigames and hub environment are these purple glitchy cassette tapes that you can collect. As you collect the 16 available tapes, that mascot bunny from Pizza Party begins to take shape and move closer to your position in the hub, until he's right behind you. And these tapes aren't just for show. By flipping the switch to enter the blacklight hard mode, you can listen to all 16 tapes that tell a very interesting story. Unfortunately for us, these tapes were not provided in order, but rest assured, we've had more than enough time now to sort that out. Our storyteller, labeled Tape Girl by the community, tells us about how she worked at a game development team hired by Fazbear Entertainment to make this VR experience. She tells us various stories, including how the team scanned in some junk from Fazbear, Jeremy's experience with Glitchtrap, and his incident with a paper slicer, as well as her own experience with him. By the end of her testing, it had attached itself to her tapes, and she couldn't destroy them. Luckily, she says she managed to find a way for you to destroy them, somehow. Following her orders, you are transported behind a door, and Glitchtrap appears, walking away almost gleefully. So, I think it's safe to say that the Ennard theory was kinda debunked. But where does that leave us? Game theory's first theory proposed that Glitchtrap is the entity of whomever was last trapped in the game. Starting as some code entity, it swapped with others, and now we're the next in line, swapping with Tape Girl. However, the more common interpretation now is that Glitchtrap is a separate entity, who is now allowed to enter our mind, likely through this door ending. This would lead directly into Curse of Dreadbear, and the creation of Vanny in the mind of our player, Vanessa. The main debate to this day stems from Glitchtrap and what exactly he is. There have been countless videos on his identity. Maybe he's Afton, M1, M2, M3, or even a combination. There is no one definitive reigning theory, so it's really up for you to research and decide for yourself, but the growing focus on mimics seems to point towards a mimic inclusion of some kind. It would explain the ORGN Endohead, and why in 2 tapes, Glitchtrap seems to mimic Tape Girl's voice to trick our player. Returning back to those tapes, Tape Girl also mentions how Fazbear hired the indie dev to make those games based on fictitious scenarios. She also explains how it is part of an elaborate cover-up, which is also explored in the Tales from the Pizzaplex story, Help Wanted. This led game theory to the idea of this game being a soft reboot, decanonizing all the games beforehand as in-universe games. While versions of this theory are still around today, it isn't very popular for good reason. After all, if the events in the games aren't real, then what is there to cover up with these indie games and VR experiences? After Curse of Dreadbear, the base game of Help Wanted received 2 final content updates, each with a small bit of lore to tease the next project. The first was an inclusion of a new door in Pizza Party, which led you outside on a cold day of construction for the Mega Pizzaplex. I wonder what game that could be teasing. Almost a whole year later, Help Wanted received a mobile port with a significant reduction in the amount of content. However, to make up for the lack of tapes, Steel Wool has provided us with a new minigame, Princess Quest. This is actually an early version of Princess Quest 1 from Security Breach, meaning this was likely another teaser for their next big project. The fact that Princess Quest replaces the tape collection from the original version seems to imply that Princess Quest 1 mirrors Vanessa's story in Help Wanted. Something to think about for the other Princess Quest machines and their role in the story. But I'm not here to talk about Security Breach. Well, it looks like my time is almost up. Thanks to Bronze Films for having me on, and be sure to subscribe to both of our channels for amazing FNAF theories. Trust me, you're missing out otherwise. And now I'm floating away, no!
Thank you Minibite Games, and again, everyone please make sure to go check out his channel. So now that you basically know everything about Help Wanted, now we can look at a list of mysteries that I think make up the majority of the game and whether or not we can solve them. I know this list can be debatable, especially since there's so many smaller mysteries within this game, but to me these are at the core of the game and its story. So I'll do the same when we get to the Dreadbear portion of this video, a list of a few different mysteries. But number 1, the endings. And now there are a few endings to Help Wanted with some being easier to understand than others, but at this point in the lore are we able to 100% understand each each of those endings and how they connected or set up future FNAF games? Well, we'll find out soon. Number 2, who is Glitchtrap? Glitchtrap was the newest antagonist revealed with this new arc of the series. Of course, the first thought was that this was Afton coming back once more, but now it's widely believed that it's actually the Mimic, but one way or the other, Glitchtrap has had a significant role and it's clear that their true identity does matter. Number 3, the tapes and the glitch. There are a total of 16 tapes to collect, all talking about the same thing, which I know is Glitchtrap, but with this mystery I want to focus on the glitch itself and the tie-in it had with a certain game we all kinda forgot about. Number 4, Princess Quest. Believe it or not, Help Wanted was the very first project where Princess Quest appeared. It was exclusive to the mobile port of this game, but nonetheless, it's still the very first time we saw this character. So, who is the princess? What is this minigame, and does this first appearance have any importance? Number 5, was any of it even real? A mystery that is also known as games fiction, where Help Wanted revealed that the first 4 games in the franchise are actually in-universe games that are all made by an indie game developer, Scott Cawthon, meaning the events and tragedies from those games never really happened. This is definitely a controversial mystery that we'll get to soon. So now that we have our list of 5 mysteries, we can start to go one by one answering which ones have been solved, which ones we have a really good idea about but can be debatable, and lastly the ones we know absolutely nothing about. Alongside answering if each mystery has been solved, I also want to bring up videos from theorists that can be fundamental to helping our understanding of this game. Starting with the first mystery that I think we can confidently say has been solved, the endings. There are a total of 5 endings, with 3 of them being pretty similar in my opinion to show that Glitchtrap is free and is infecting things and people. In the first ending, once the pizza party level in Night Terrors is completed, after first completing every other minigame, the player will then be put into a room with animatronics, balloons, and a birthday cake right in front of them. That's when Glitchtrap appears behind the curtains, telling the player to follow him. The player is then stuffed inside of the Freddy animatronic while Hand Unit announces the arrival of Freddy and the show begins. The room then lights up with Glitchtrap dancing in the background. Now this ending can be seen in a few ways, but here's Glitchtrap mimicking William Afton and the missing children incident, luring someone to a back room and then stuffing them into one of the animatronics. And most important, I think it's clear that this is signifying Glitchtrap trapping the player in the VR game while they dance free, and the next 2 endings really aren't that different. In what can be known as the merge ending, you have to collect all 16 tapes where Tape Girl reveals a way to defeat Glitchtrap. If you do not follow Tape Girl's instructions, the player's view will slowly fade to purple and glitch before fading into the perspective of Glitchtrap. Here, Glitchtrap is merging with the player's consciousness, which most likely occurred with Vanessa when she would be manipulated into Vanny, yet another way Glitchtrap is free. With the same ending, if you do follow Tape Girl's instructions, the player will be taken into a room with only a giant soul door in front of them. The player can move a part of the door to reveal Glitchtrap on the other side. He will shush the player before moving back into the darkness. Here, Glitchtrap is literally trapping the player in some sort of prison inside the VR game, while he is once more free as a virus to infect whatever he wants. The next 2 endings are ones I'm going to discuss as part of different mysteries, as they aren't really a part of the base game, so with the endings I discussed, I think we can say that they have been solved. They all serve the same purpose in showing us that Glitchtrap is free while the player is trapped, and this pays off really in every single game that follows in the timeline. In FNAF Special Delivery, we learn how Glitchtrap is infecting Fazbear's Entertainment. In FNAF Security Breach, we saw Glitchtrap in the form of Vanny, the main antagonist of that game. And in Help Wanted 2, we finally saw Glitchtrap being destroyed, freeing Vanessa. So again, really each of these endings paid off in some way or another. The second mystery that I think we can say has been solved by now are the tapes and the glitch itself. As I said earlier, there are a total of 16 tapes to collect, each telling a story about the glitch. We learn how a client sent old circuit boards for the development team to scan into the game to speed up the process of the VR game. This is how Glitchtrap was uploaded into Help Wanted, and from here beta testers would begin to see Glitchtrap. We learn that Glitchtrap is trying to escape, and as I discussed with the endings, he is successful. So what is there even to solve? Well, I think it's more how this is connected to FNAF games that came after Help Wanted. Of course, we know that Glitchtrap escaped through Vanessa in Security Breach, as in Special Delivery we learn about her transition to Vanny, and just how exactly she would become head security guard to the Pizzaplex. With the tapes, we would also learn about Jeremy, one of the first beta testers to see Glitchtrap who would eventually take their own life, an incident that of course Fazbear Entertainment tried to shove under the rug. And this would only be the tip of the iceberg. With Security Breach, not only do we have the all-staff meeting massacre where all human employees were called into a meeting where they would all be murdered and replaced by staff bots, an incident also shoved under the rug by Fazbear, and one that was most likely initiated by Vanny or Glitchtrap. But we also have a new set of children missing who were kidnapped and murdered by Vanny, all under the orders of Glitchtrap. And the client I mentioned earlier could be explained with Secret of the Mimic. Here we of course learn of Murray's Costume Manor, a contracted business owned by Edwin Murray, who would mechanically make Fazbear's ideas possible. So if you really want to throw an idea out there, this random client could have been what was left of MCM after 1979, or even Edwin Murray himself, who desperately wanted the circuit board that contained the Mimic chip to be uploaded into the VR game, which would then manifest into Glitchtrap. But don't worry, whether or not Glitchtrap is the Mimic or William Afton is something we'll talk about soon. So the reason I'm even bringing any of this up is to show showed just how expansive the lore from these tapes would really become. At the time this game was released, I feel like the lore from these tapes could have been a lot to take in, especially when the last time we heard of Fazbear was in Pizzeria Simulator, where their last location was closed down and all the swords of the animatronics had been freed. So to hear about Fazbear Entertainment being back with a VR game, about a glitch, about new tragedies with the franchise felt like a bit random or confusing. But now obviously we know how all of this would pay off, leaving the mystery of the tapes and their lore 100% solved. For the next mystery that has been solved, the Princess Quest. Like I said, this is exclusive to the mobile port, but this is still Help Wanted and definitely worth mentioning. This minigame is like any other version we've seen of Princess Quest throughout the different games. You play as a princess destroying parts of the glitch, lighting lanterns, solving puzzles, all in an effort to complete the minigame where you'll be face to face with the glitch itself. A glitching purple rabbit-like monster. The glitch then speaks to you in a cryptic message when decoded reads, "I always come back." After this, the minigame will end and you'll be brought back to the main menu. And at the end, you can also hear strange audios, which when reversed and sped up, it states, "I always come back, let me out." Now this just screams William Afton, and this will definitely be a piece of evidence we look back on when talking about Glitch Trap. Well, this is one of the first 8-bit style of minigames that we're all familiar with from the earlier FNAF games, inside this new era of the franchise that at the time didn't make too much sense. Sure, we had a giant rabbit-like creature that we could all agree was William at the time. He had his soul somehow transferred onto an old circuit board, which was then uploaded into the VR game. That would then manifest into Glitch Trap. He's coming back once more. But what about the princess? Who is she? What is this minigame? Why is Glitch Trap inside this minigame? All valid questions that would have left this minigame as unsolved. But of course, now we can answer all of these questions. Well, except for one. We now know that there were actually multiple Princess Quest arcade machines that were crucial to freeing parts of Vanessa in Security Breach. As in the Princess Quest ending, after Gregory beats Princess Quest 3, it's assumed Vanessa is freed from Glitch Trap's control and is able to escape the Pizzaplex with Gregory alongside Glamrock Freddy's head. Then in FNAF Help Wanted 2, the player must complete Princess Quest 4, where at the end, the player will find themselves in a giant claw machine, where Vanny will then pop out, take the Glitch Trap plush from Moon, and will destroy the remaining parts of Glitch Trap, defeating the virus and fully freeing herself in the process. So years later, we now know these arcade machines house the Glitch Trap virus and were the key to freeing Vanessa from Glitch Trap's control. Now the one question we still can't really answer, and one I covered in my Security Breach retrospective video, which you should totally check out, is the identity of the princess, and just how these modern games really haven't explored any possibilities. Sure, you can bring up a few theories, but I don't know if any have enough concrete evidence to solve this mystery. But with Help Wanted and the Princess Quest arcade machines themselves, we do have all the answers solving this mystery. Now looking at the final solved mystery, was any of it real? At the very start of Help Wanted, Hand Unit tells us that Fazbear Entertainment has gained a bad reputation over the years that are based on loose real-life events, but the majority of those events are totally fabrications of a complete lunatic, Scott Cawthon. So Fazbear is now recreating many of those complete fictitious scenarios that we've been fed over the past few years into this VR game. So Help Wanted is making it seem that Scott Cawthon in the first 4 games he created before Help Wanted were complete lies, meaning all of the events, characters are all lies as well, which is a huge reveal as most of the franchise would basically be retconned. Game Theory has an amazing video going over this possibility. FNAF Golden Freddy never existed. Here MatPat goes over how the first 4 FNAF games are now in-universe games, meaning established lore and history are not questionable as they were all through the game's developer's perspective. Characters like the Crying Child the most likely are not canon to the universe because his existence is based mainly on the 4th game. Golden Freddy might also no longer exist. The dozens of inconsistencies with Golden Freddy's designs could be because of a game developer who was going through a lot mentally. So was any of it even real? Well, after all this confusion, Scott Cawthon himself made a post on Reddit clarifying his appearance and questions about the game developer. Scott Cawthon makes it clear that he is not canon to the franchise and that the indie game developer is its own character that simply uses the face of Scott Cawthon, and using real-life images is something he's already done in games like FNAF 4 and Ultimate Custom Night. So he's not canon, and we're not canon, which really made me sad, and Fred isn't canon. The only thing that is canon is the game developer, which means that Fazbear could be lying about the game developer and their claims to undo his lies, and we actually get an answer to this through Tape Girl's messages.
They lied to us. They lied to all of us. They told us that the whole point of this VR game was to undo the bad PR done by a rogue indie game developer who supposedly made up a bunch of crazy stories that tarnished the brand. But that's not true at all. In their haste to develop this VR game and clear their name, they sent us some things I don't think they intended us to see, such as a hard drive containing emails between Fazbear Entertainment and a certain indie developer. Fazbear Entertainment hired the game developer. Those indie games were designed to conceal and make light of what happened. This isn't just an attempt to rebrand. It's an elaborate cover-up, a campaign to discredit everything.
Of course, Fazbear is actually lying and is working with the indie game developer, meaning all claims are actually true, meaning those tragedies and characters do 100% exist. So although games fiction still could be argued, I think it's clear what Help Wanted was implying with the game developer, and it wasn't that the first games are not canon, making this mystery solved. Now looking at the first and only kinda solved mystery, who is Glitchtrap? This is also a mystery I talked about with the FNAF Security Breach video, but with this video, the mystery was more focused on the connections to the Mimic. So with Help Wanted, of course, we also have to consider the other possibility, William Afton. Like I said earlier, it's believed William would somehow possess an old circuit board, and when it was scanned into the VR game, William would come back once more as Glitchtrap. We even hear this infamous line with the Glitchtrap virus itself only connecting the two characters that much further. Of course, with Glitchtrap's design, this perfectly mirrors Spring Bonnie and all of William's renditions with this character as Springtrap, Scraptrap, and even Dark Springtrap. If this character was meant to be someone else, why make them look exactly like Spring Bonnie? In the game files, there was even a scrap version of Glitchtrap, which is literally just Spring Bonnie, and this was actually the very first time we ever got a model for this character. So it looks like originally Spring Bonnie was supposed to be in Glitchtrap's place, making it clear who this character was. In Security Breach, William would take over Vanessa's mind to not only recreate the murders and kidnappings of children, but to also bring him back into the real world as Burntrap. Another character that shares clear similarities to all of William Afton's renditions as Springtrap. His suit is olive and dark yellow in color with an exposed human jawbone with teeth. His eyes are pitch black with purple glowing pupils. His right foot endoskeleton is completely exposed while his left foot still has its costume covering. So at this point you might be telling me to move on because it's pretty obvious that William is Glitchtrap in the virtual world and Burntrap in the physical world, and that it seems like this was always supposed to be the case. Although there is a lot of strong evidence to him being William, there is just as much and if not more evidence for Glitchtrap being the Mimic. With Secret of the Mimic, it introduced the possibility of Glitchtrap being M1 or M2. One of the main differences with Glitchtrap that separates his designs to the rest of William's appearances is the fact that it's a mascot suit and not a Springlock suit, a difference that theorists like FNAF pointed out for the mascots having a much more important role than we realized and have continued to. And now we of course know he was right with Secret of the Mimic, where mascots played a huge role with like the White Tiger mascot and Party Time Chica. So this fact alone sways many, including myself, to say that Glitchtrap is the Mimic, and I was even surprised that we never saw the mascot suit itself somewhere in the game, as I think it does make a lot of sense that this would be something made by Edwin Murray. But again, now it just lies in deciding which program it is. If it is M1 or F10, and for it, this would mean that the program designed to mimic Fiona was uploaded into the Help Wanted game. So why would the program designed to mimic Fiona decide to now mimic William Afton and his actions? Well, this could be that it's mimicking the information of the game and of Fazbear Entertainment. The mimic program acts on the data it is receiving, so here it's taking in all the information of the game and of Fazbear like the MCI. So the mimic is simply using Afton's personality and face as like a tool. But with them too, it could be a scenario where the endoskeleton itself and a separate copy of its program exist at the same time and are working together. It can be argued that with the physical mimic being trapped, the virtual mimic is helping him get out. M2 would be uploaded into Help Wanted, would represent himself as William and as Nightmare, which is something I discussed here, and then he would take over Vanessa so she could help him with freeing the physical mimic. Now whether this could be through Burntrap or just releasing the Mimic to be free in the Pizzaplex, Glitchtrap and the Mimic are working together. It can also be argued that Glitchtrap represented himself as Helpy in Ruin and in Help Wanted 2, as this ending where the player keeps the Glitchtrap virus alive, we see him exiting the charging station. Helpy would have been using the player to complete tasks to collect these Fast Force toys, which is how Glitchtrap emerged from the charging station. But at the same time, in the other ending, which fans both regard as canon, we see Glitchtrap being destroyed by Vanny, freeing herself. So by the time Ruin happens in the timeline, Glitchtrap is most likely destroyed, leaving just the physical M2 Mimic. So we have two very possible solutions to a character introduced 6 years ago, but yet we still don't have a final answer. So although we're not completely in the dark with this character like we might have been in 2019, we still can't find a concrete answer, leaving Glitchtrap as kinda solved. So with that, we have 4 mysteries that are solved and 1 mystery kinda solved, which is a pretty good ratio so far. Before we move on, I also want to bring up a great video by Rightos released more than a year ago that was a part of his games only timeline where he revisited each game and added all of the lore from them onto this board. So I personally checked out this video for a really nice updated refresher on Help Wanted, and you should totally do the same. But now we can move on to the Dreadbear DLC released on October 23rd, 2019 that has just as much lore as the base game. So now looking at a new list of mysteries, number 1 we have Dreadbear himself. This was an entirely new character introduced for this DLC, so who are they? Are they somehow connected to another infamous character, and how do they fit with the overarching lore and timeline? Number 2, Fall Fest. The Dreadbear DLC is actually the very first time Fall Fest was revealed, and it's an event that has continued to show up in the modern games. So what is it and just how important is Fall Fest? Number 3, the Aftons and Midnight Motorist. This DLC gave us a lot, and I mean a lot of hints to the earlier FNAF games and to the Afton family. Hints that tell us about the locations themselves, how it all fits with different minigames, and how these settings have continued to have a large role with the new pizzerias and lore. Number 4, Vanny. Through this DLC we got a setup to the character of Vanny through her easily recognizable mask, a mask that we didn't know much about at the time. So now what does this mask mean? Where has it appeared, and will it continue to have some role? So like Help Wanted, join me as we now go through each single mystery in depth. Starting with the first solve the mystery, who and what is Dreadbear? Dreadbear is a Frankenstein-style Freddy and is pretty different to most animatronics we're familiar with in the franchise. You may think that he's a character made just for the DLC and nothing else, but I think it can definitely be argued that he's so much more. Of course, the main comparison is to the infamous Golden Freddy. Of course, Dreadbear is a play on the name Fredbear, they share similarities with their designs, and the entire Dreadbear DLC is centered around FNAF 4 imagery, which is of course where Fredbear and Crying Child play a huge role in. There are also smaller details like an It's Me Easter egg in the barn we see in the main hub, a phrase that has popularly been connected to Golden Freddy. And in Ultimate Custom Night, we see the Vengeful Spear or Golden Freddy travel to some unknown place where he finds Old Man Consequences. OMC tries to reason with Golden Freddy to stop torturing William Afton in this purgatory or nightmare, but ultimately the player has the choice to drown in this red lake ending the Easter egg. And in this DLC, in a sense, we see the aftermath. Here there's a chance that the sky and lake will turn red. Look familiar? Then Dreadbear will rise from the red lake and will walk all the way to the barn where the It's Me Easter egg took place. That's right, this is Golden Freddy rising from the lake being given a new life. To further explain these ideas, I want to look at Narrow Raven's video on this DLC, the Afton family solves FNAF Curse of Dreadbear, and so much more. So check out the full video here. Here he makes connections with Dreadbear to Fredbear and the Crying Child, and he even makes connections to Secret of the Mimic by exploring William's relationship with Edwin Murray. He also looks into how William would bring back the Crying Child by putting a frequency in his brain, some life and electricity to jumpstart it, where he would then put it into Fredbear, who would then later become Golden Freddy. In general, he brings up these really cool connections with multiple projects and games all centered around Curse of Dreadbear, so make sure to check out the full video. But with Dreadbear, I think these connections to FNAF 4, the Crying Child, and Golden Freddy are clear, and it's hard to try to take this character any other route. And this is just mainly using evidence from this DLC and past games, so when more games were released only supporting this idea, it easily left this mystery 100% solved. Now looking at the next solved mystery, this Vanny mask and the ending to the Dreadbear DLC. In the secret ending to the DLC, the player needs to unlock the Corn Maze minigame, where the player will then collect all 4 keys available instead of just the one. Once done, the player needs to go back to the spawn zone where they will find an entrance to a basement. Getting close to the entrance, the doors will automatically open, prompting the player to go downstairs. There, they will find a Game 1 banner alongside a white rabbit mask on a table. The player has the option to wear the mask, where they will then hear heavy breathing before the screen fades to black, and you will then be taken to the main menu. You can also view the mask in the collectibles area, and you can also wear it whenever you want. At the time, this felt like our first tease at the franchise's next big villain, the next Springtrap, the next William Afton. The rabbit mask shared clear similarities to Spring Bonnie and really to all of William's designs, so would this be the next murderous villain? Well, Game Theory made an amazing video on a possibility that was known as the Cult of Glitchtrap in the video of FNAF, the Cult of Glitchtrap, FNAF AR Curse of Dreadbear DLC. Here MatPat was honestly pretty spot on with his rabbit mask from the end of the DLC, correctly predicting the name Vanny, Vanessa, and even her own Security Breach as the servant of William Afton or Glitchtrap. It's honestly surprising just how much Game Theory was accurately able to predict about this character and parts of the modern timeline. As I've said a couple of times, Vanny has become one of the main antagonists of the modern games, and has continued to have some role from Special Delivery all the way to Help Wanted 2. Although she wasn't in Secret of the Mimic, which makes sense since that game did take place in 1979, she did have a role in Ruin, which is where we don't really see Vanny at all, just as Vanessa. She's most likely working with Gregory to stop the Mimic, and they might have traveled back to the Pizzaplex to enable Mexus, which is why we find Gregory's backpack down in the sinkhole. She also showed up in the secret ending where Cassie wears the Vanny mask in front of this Fredbear cardboard cutout, where she is then put in this false reality where she escapes the Pizzaplex safely with Helpy, Gregory, and of course Vanessa happily sitting on this hillside. There are a lot of different opinions with Vanessa and her character, with most people agreeing that she wasn't utilized to her full potential even though she was being advertised as the next big bad of the series. This has gotten better as games have gone on, especially with Help Wanted 2 finally giving us some end to Vanny and her story. But what's next for this character? Well, when looking back at Game Theory's video, they bring up a possibility that didn't directly come true at the time Security Breach was released, but now it's looking more likely than ever to happen. MatPat also theorized that there would not only be one but multiple followers under Glitchtrap's control, and that they would all be members of some cult, the cult of Glitchtrap. They would then commit the same crimes as Afton did in Security Breach. Now unfortunately this didn't exactly happen since we only had Vanny in the Pizzaplex, but now thanks to Ruin and Help Wanted 2, we actually learned there were dozens of Vanny masks. In Help Wanted 2 we learned that every employer would actually have their own Vanny mask, which is how they would travel between the fixed and destroyed parts of the Pizzaplex and of the sinkhole. In Ruin, Cassie also of course wears a Vanny mask, a mask that appears to be affecting her one way or another. So it's heavily theorized that in the next project that could have Abyss in its name, it would feature Cassie surviving the elevator fall, wearing the mask once more, and officially becoming the new Vanny under the Mimic's control. This could also mean that any employee or character from the modern timeline who has worn a Vanny mask has a chance of becoming the new Vanny, which would then result in dozens of people under Glitchtrap's, Williams, or even the Mimic's control, becoming new secondary antagonists just like MatPat predicted so long ago. But with the mask itself in the Dreadbird DLC, 6 years later we know exactly how it would pay off in the form of Vanny with all these new games, and we might also be able to predict the future of these masks and with the character of Vanny. Now looking at the final solved mystery, which you could also argue is the first kind of solved mystery, the Afton family house and the FNAF 4 imagery. Oh, and of course Midnight Motorist. In the hub of the DLC you can find the exact same Afton family house from Five Nights at Freddy's 4. This is the first time we've seen this house since the game was initially released. It has the exact same shape and layout where the house sits on a hillside surrounded by trees and a forest. So what does this tell us? Well, it relates to another mystery I'll talk about next. This reveals to us that Fall Fest has always been near and right in front of the Afton family house this entire time. In the same area you can also find this car in front of the monitors that looks like a simple truck with white headlights to the player. But you can change this truck's headlights by pressing a hidden button which actually turns the car's headlights purple, which is an obvious reference to the Midnight Motorist minigame. From this confusing minigame it's assumed that this house is the Afton family house and that orange guy is actually purple guy who's driving a purple car. The same purple car from the Charlie minigame in FNAF 2 and the same car we see in the Dreadbird DLC. The headlights turning purple is a clear reference to the purple car in Midnight Motorist, which not only makes these two cars the same, but it also makes the setting and location identical as well. This confirms that the Midnight Motorist house is the Afton family house that we find in the distance and surrounded by a forest just like in Midnight Motorist. So if the cars and houses are the same, then what does this mean for Fall Fest and the setting in Midnight Motorist? Well, when lining up the layouts of the minigame for Midnight Motorist and for the Dreadbird DLC, the only place Fall Fest and its barn could be is in this clearing where we find the pile of dirt, which makes perfect sense as it's a wide enough area for the carnival and the pile of dirt could be here to represent where the barn used to be, meaning we know Fall Fest has to be near the Afton house and in this specific clearing next to the barn and next to the Midnight Motorist car. But the connection of Fall Fest to other locations doesn't stop there. When looking at the Help Wanted secret ending, we find a tease and setup to Security Breach where we find the Pizzaplex is under construction and is hiring, but that's not all. To the side of us and behind us we find the exact same car and barn that we could also find in the Fall Fest 83 event. The two cars are the exact same truck and even have the same imperfections in the same exact places. The barn also appears to be identical with their similar shape and overall design. The barn is to the left of the car just like it is in the Dreadbird DLC. They are clearly meant to be the same thing in the exact same area, which would mean that the Pizzaplex was constructed right in front of what would have been Fall Fest. But by this point in the timeline, Fall Fest is nothing but a simple clearing in a forest. This would also confirm that the Afton family house is somewhere off to the distance of the Pizzaplex. We even find the similar hills and mountains from the Dreadbird DLC where the house would have resided. But there's even more connections with the latest project, Secret of the Mimic. When focusing on the building of MCM where this game takes place and on the exterior of it, we find that the manor is surrounded by a forest, and to the side of the manor on top of a hillside we find yet another house. That's right, MCM and Secret of the Mimic take place in the exact same area I've been discussing in this video. It's surrounded by the exact same forest we've seen in the Dreadbird DLC and in the secret ending of Help Wanted. It's surrounded by the exact same mountain and hills that are no coincidence, as I believe this was also to connect MCM to the other locations from the franchise. And of course we find the same house, the house that sits on a hillside surrounded by trees, but there's one major difference. This is not the same house as the Afton's house. Yes, it's in the exact same area, but here in 1979 when this game takes place, this house or mansion actually belonged to Edwin Murray. In one of the endings for this game, we see a fire burn down the warehouse and the connecting mansion, which is where William Afton would come in and take over Edwin's life and property, including the house. So what if after the fire, William would save what was left of the mansion and would remodel it to the FNAF 4 house we all know and remember? During the good ending where Arnold is able to reset the Mimic's programming to mimic David by playing him a bedtime story, we get a glimpse of David's room. And of course this room is almost almost identical to the main room from FNAF 4 where all nights are played. They share a similar blue carpet, cabinets, and even patterns on the wall, and the closets where the Mimic and Foxy would come out of are almost identical, and most importantly, they both share these exact same toys. Toys that we have only ever seen in the FNAF 4 house that are once more returning in David's room. This just can't be a coincidence, and I think it's to tell us that they are the same. So after the MCM fire, William would fix what's left of the mansion and would create it into a smaller house with the same toys and style of room. So this house that appeared in the Dread DLC 6 years later would be the key to connecting most locations and pizzerias, leaving this mystery solved. And now looking at the really only kind of solved mystery, what is Fall Fest? Like I said earlier with one of the other mysteries, here we learn that this DLC takes place within the Fall Fest Carnival, as the game's hub contains a banner advertising Fall Fest 1983. This is an entirely new event that takes place within the timeline that we've never seen before. Well, we kinda did in FNAF Pizzeria Simulator with this Spookfest poster, which we can assume is the same as Fall Fest. But of course at the time we couldn't imagine that it would be connected to this event in Help Wanted. So at the time this game was released, we knew absolutely nothing about Fall Fest, but now we know a lot, and I mean a lot more. We saw a poster for Fall Fest 1970 revealed in the Help Wanted 2 game hub, as we can also assume that the carousel minigames focusing around Moon where you have to fix the carousel while avoiding him, and the Carnage minigames where you shoot at targets with a phaser blast for points both took place in the Fall Fest Carnival itself. And up to this point we would only get more and more references and Easter eggs to this carnival. In Security Breach we found this arcade game of Balloon Boy which took place in a carnival, this poster advertising Freddy's singing show. In Ruin we saw these carnival animal mascot suits, and even the Mimic wore a carnival lion suit in the Scooper ending. And now finally, with Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic being released, we now have concrete information on the Fall Fest Carnival. Here we learn that MCM had a part in making attractions for Fall Fest and for Fazbear. So wife of Edwin Murray, Fiona Murray, went to Fall Fest alongside the installation crew and supposedly died there. It's believed this was actually the work of William, like most things, luring Fiona to Fall Fest somehow, starting a fire that killed her and maybe others that would then make it all look like an accident. This would all be an attempt to destroy Edwin's life and to take over his company and his land, things I've discussed in a couple of videos now. So we've gotten a mention of Fall Fest in every single FNAF project since Help Wanted, and it looks like it's something that will continue to make an appearance, but why? And that's just the big question we really can't answer. We know it was a recurring event in the timeline with Fall Fest 1983 and Fall Fest in the early 70s, being important in this DLC and in Secret of the Mimic. But even then we only get glances into this event and nothing more. Many of us, including myself, are still hoping we get some sort of Fall Fest DLC to Secret of the Mimic, or that it will even be a mainline game after we return to the Pizzaplex one more time in what's being known as Abyss. And really it just seems like we need one more dedicated project to this event, and one that will also feature the Mimic, especially in a lot of these endings where we just don't know what would happen to the Mimic or how he would end up trapped in the sinkhole decades later. Like in this bad ending, where did he wander off to in the forest? Maybe Fall Fest. So until then, although we have so much more information than we did at the time Help Wanted was out, a lot is still up in the air, leaving this mystery as kinda solved. So now that we've gone over every single mystery and if they've been solved or not, now we can finally answer the question centered around this entire video. Has FNAF Help Wanted been solved 6 years later? Yes, absolutely. If you want to have an exact number, taking the mysteries, 77.78 mysteries of Help Wanted have been solved, which is a way better ratio than Security Breach, as only 33% of that game had been solved. Now I could see some taking this number and saying that it's still just kinda solved, and in a sense I agree. But with every kinda solved mystery I discussed, I think we're so close to solving them, as really a DLC or a new game could have everything we need to find an answer to mysteries like Glitch Trap and Fall Fest. But even then, I still believe this game has been solved, and this is also just my interpretation. At this point we've gotten 2 Help Wanted games, and don't worry, we'll get to Help Wanted 2 in this series eventually. So what does the future hold? Will we get Help Wanted 3? Will we get a DLC to Help Wanted 2, which is still notably missing? Well, this is harder to say. Obviously Studio is still part of VR projects, since the VR port of Secret of the Mimic is still supposed to be released, so why wouldn't they make a DLC or Help Wanted 3? I could see Help Wanted 3 being our Fall Fest game, and I'm sure we'll get even more VR projects with this franchise. Now let's take a look at FNAF Special Delivery, which was also released more than 6 years ago, and in my opinion is the most forgotten FNAF game from the series. The canonicity of this game has even heavily been debated, with some arguing that only parts of this game are canon, like how it sets up Security Breach, while others argue that it should not be regarded as canon and that it should simply be ignored. So like with FNAF Help Wanted, have we solved FNAF AR? For a brief history on FNAF AR and on its lore, this game would release after Help Wanted and would be the project right before FNAF Security Breach. Before we would get this game, small teaser images would be released, like this image showcasing Freddy, Chica, and Fox inside of a home. There would also be smaller puzzle teaser images that when put together would reveal another teaser featuring Foxy, Circus Baby, and Springtrap alongside a colored in version of this puzzle. Then on September 16th we would get our very first teaser trailer, a table in a room with Chica's cupcake, Foxy's hook, Bonnie's bow tie, and Freddy's mic flashlight with the phone at the center of the table. The phrase "It's me" would then proceed to flash on the phone while Freddy's shadow would begin to creep over the screen. On October 15, 2019, we would get the second teaser trailer featuring the same table and phone from the first one, but this time the phone would flash the messages "Hello and I will find you." Finally, on November 25th, 2019, we would get a launch trailer that featured none other than Markiplier as an announcer for Fazbear's Entertainment, showcasing the Fazbear Funtime delivery service. This trailer would take place in the real world and would feature the entire AR aspect that made this FNAF game pretty unique. Animatronics like Foxy, Chica, Balloon Boy, and Freddy would all arrive at this house while this person obviously tries to get away, and the trailer would then end with a jump scare from Circus Baby, which also brings me to the lore of the game. Here you're playing as a subscriber of the Eternal Funtime Special Delivery Service, where Fazbear Entertainment is kindly sending out different animatronics to you, but of course they're either malfunctioning or acting violent, so use your flashlight and shock the animatronics to reset them, where you can then collect them in your workshop. You can also collect an endoskeleton which is customizable in your workshop. You can then deploy that animatronic to collect parts and to salvage parts from other animatronics, which definitely makes me think of FNAF Pizzeria Simulator and that salvage process. You can also collect Remnant, which is what powers the animatronics while having to face Shadow Bonnie, a huge aspect of this game we'll get back to soon. Now the lore can honestly be seen in a couple of ways, one being with the animatronics. Animatronics that were supposed to be destroyed or freed by this point are new animatronic skins that might have deeper meanings. There are also emos, which is what most people remember from this game, as these emos include huge lore drops that told us about characters or stories that would then play off in Security Breach and in other FNAF games. And finally, there was an entire DLC to this game that I feel is more forgotten than the base game, a DLC that seemed to be exclusive to just FNAF AR's lore. Now this could have happened because of the price of the DLC when it was initially released, which was $20, while the base game was free, or because at the point it was released, it felt like most fans had already sadly moved on. Especially with FNAF AR shutting down on March 14, 2025, this DLC was left behind, but trust me, there's a lot of interesting lore here that I can't wait to talk about. So now that you hopefully have a general idea of FNAF AR and on its lore, now we can look at a list of mysteries that I believe make up this game. Now this list can totally be debated, but this is just my interpretation, as I think these are at the core of the lore and especially with what they set up with future games and characters. So number one, we have the animatronics. Not only are we seeing animatronics that shouldn't even exist anymore, but we're seeing specific animatronics return which may or may not have a greater meaning that once again connects to future games like Security Breach. Number two, we have the emails. What do these emails tell us? How do they connect to other games like Help Wanted and Security Breach? Well, soon we'll go over every set of emails to find out. Number three, Golden Freddy. Now this is an animatronic that I think deserved its own category on this list because of how odd it is we're even seeing Golden Freddy at all in this game. So why? Is it the vengeful spirit or crying child coming back once more? Does this have anything to do with Remnant or its programming? We'll find out soon because I think Golden Freddy had to be added for a very specific reason. Number four, the Dark Circus Encore DLC. This circus themed DLC introduced a new and pretty unique setting for this game alongside some new animatronics that may have a meaning to their designs. So what are the animatronics? What is this circus? Does it somehow connect to another infamous circus that we all know about at this point? But finally, we have number five, Remnant and Shadow Bonnie. Remnant has always been a crucial aspect of the FNAF franchise with small references here and there throughout the games and books. But with FNAF Special Delivery, because Remnant and Shadow Bonnie both finally take center stage, we get more information about Remnant and why we would even need to be collecting it. So we have our history, recap of the lore, and now our list of mysteries. So now we can go one by one answering which ones are solved while also bringing up videos that had a huge role in understanding this game. One last thing before we move on to the mysteries, please make sure to check out my latest game concept, What If FNAF Help Wanted was a classic FNAF game. This is my best video yet in my opinion that is a fully animated game concept going over the gameplay, mechanics, characters, nights, endings, Easter eggs, secrets, minigames, and so much more. So I really would appreciate it a lot if you checked it out and left your thoughts in the comments, but back to the video. And now looking at the first mystery on this list, the animatronics and the lore behind them. Now at the surface it may not seem like Chocolate Bonnie has any lore, but trust me, as a whole there is, okay? By this point in the timeline, every animatronic besides the modern ones who haven't even been introduced yet have either been destroyed, burned in a fire, or had their souls freed from their animatronic. So with someone like Toy Bonnie from Five Nights at Freddy's 2, who last appeared in FNAF 3 as scraps in this box located in the office, how is it possible they're returning in FNAF AR? Well, through emails and details, this game tells us that these are new animatronics being built by partners and contractors for Fazbear for the new Funtime service. So this is not the same Toy Bonnie from FNAF 2, and this would apply to every single animatronic we see, especially the skins to these animatronics like Liberty Chica, as these are new animatronics being made. The partners who are making these animatronics do have some lore of their own that we'll get back to soon, but I also think it's worth mentioning that these these new animatronics genuinely believe that they are the same as the old ones, a fact probably because of how the programming was designed.
Did you know I used to be a real rock star?
This almost makes us yearn for the days of the Kids Cove. Never again. Never, never, ever, never. I know they said I couldn't be put back together, but see how wrong they were?
There's also a new feature with these animatronics the hand unit in the game specifically point out, called Anim Stealth. This feature allows the animatronics to turn invisible when they're in front of the player. But why? Why would this technology be implemented into animatronics that are a part of an entertainment service, where they would mainly be performing for birthday parties and for children? Popular theories suggest that this technology was inspired by William Afton himself and his animatronics that were made to kill, like the Fun Times, where someone like Circus Baby was designed to scoop children into her stomach when they were alone. We can imagine that this Anim Stealth feature would be used in malicious ways, and we actually know of scenarios where these animatronics were probably used to hurt people thanks to the emails that we'll get back to soon. So if this is right, how much of William's technology were they able to copy? Well, this just takes us into a number of rabbit hole theories where someone close to William in the earlier parts of the timeline would come back in the modern lore in the games like in FNAF AR and Security Breach and would reintroduce William himself and his technology since they knew him. We could bring up anyone like Miss Afton or Michael Afton taking the role as the new CEO of Fazbear Entertainment, since we know these modern games also put a spotlight on this mysterious new CEO. Now, I could definitely be looking too deep into this feature, as it could just be here to explain the AR gameplay where they teleport around you, but nonetheless it's still interesting to think about. When taking a look at specific animatronics, all of the toy animatronics are highlighted as having new facial recognition technology, just like in FNAF 2, but for some reason all of them are malfunctioning and going haywire, like Toy Freddy, who is deemed not safe for the service. Now, this could also contradict what I just said about William's tech still being in place, since it seems that they're just not able to recreate his original technology as they're clearly failing. Mangle is also described to not be working like the original, where they could climb on the walls like a spider. You could argue this is evidence of Mangle and the other toys being possessed, as the reason they can't recreate Mangle's original features is because she was possessed and haunted, allowing her to climb on walls and move freely. But at the same time, there is an email where the client describes how difficult the construction of Mangle has been compared to when the original animatronic was created, which is the reason she can't act like the original. It could honestly go either way in that sense, and I personally like the idea of it proving the toys are possessed. Another animatronic I want to take a closer look at is 8-Bit Circus Baby, probably the most random part of this game that doesn't really fit with any other design or character, as I think she might be supporting evidence to arcade theory. Arcade theory comes from Gibby Horror Homestead, who is someone that needs no introduction. A theory saying that the arcade machines in the FNAF universe are haunted or possessed the exact same way the animatronics are. The ghosts are connected to the machines, and the human characters in the FNAF world can actually play them. So for example, the reason at the end of FNAF 6 we have images from this minigame is because they are real in-universe diegetic games that the characters can see. So you can watch this video to get the full context. I already made a video going over how the latest book, Ticket to Fun, can support this theory, but now I want to look at 8-Bit Circus Baby. If this is an actual animatronic of some sort that we're seeing inside of the FNAF universe, this could suggest that a version of the Sister Location Circus Baby minigame exists as an arcade machine. A game where people inside of FNAF could play and would be inspired to add 8-Bit Circus Baby as an animatronic to the special delivery service. We can even say that the arcade is somehow haunted by Elizabeth's soul, or at least a part of her soul, that would show how she was killed by Circus Baby. Similar to how we can also theorize an arcade machine showing Charlie's death also exists inside the FNAF world, because we saw the 8-Bit sprite inside the FNAF book I mentioned earlier. But like a lot of things with this game, this could just be a fun and interesting skin to a character. So finally, I want to look at Springtrap, who I almost considered giving his own segment, just because there's a lot going on with this character. Like with any other animatronic here, this Springtrap from FNAF AR is not the same Springtrap from FNAF 3, especially since by this point he would be Scraptrap, who would then be burned in the FNAF 6 fire. Even the game itself highlights just how weird this is through an email, and I quote, "Hey Tristan, we've been getting some weird reports here in customer service that I don't really know how to respond to. A handful of our more hardcore users of the service have been reporting service calls from an animatronic that isn't appearing anywhere in our database. Some kind of vintage Bonnie model. A couple of people have mentioned a really bad smell from it as well. Is it possible some old second-hand model somehow made it onto our deployment rotation? This clearly is not an animatronic made by these contractors, so the question of his return still stands. Well, what if a certain someone is trying to recreate Springtrap and what happened to William? This certain someone would use the animatronics to hunt and kidnap people, as in an email we know someone was giving animatronics commands and disabling their safety features. They would then recreate various spring lock incidents since we know that this someone had no problem harming people based on their alarming search history we learned once again from the emails. These attempts at recreating the spring lock incident would be experiments and trial runs to ultimately bring back William in the form of Burntrap, but that's just a theory. A game! Well, this is honestly just an explanation and idea that I have for Springtrap returning, and trust me, I know this theory has a ton of holes, which is why I just quickly wanted to throw it out there. Like, where would this person get other Spring Bonnie suits from if we know this type of animatronic was not created by Fazbear's partners? And if someone was actually spring locked, the process for them to become Springtrap should take years and even decades. So what if this is actually William himself in some way returning before he was moved to Burntrap? Many assume that the Springtrap shell is not the same as the Scraptrap one, so what if William's corpse was somehow transferred back into the original shell? This shell could even be the one we saw in the Sister Location ending that presumably took place after the FNAF 3 fire. But now I really am just throwing thoughts out there since it's hard to find a concrete answer, but I like the idea of using it to explain how William would come back as Burntrap, if we're saying he's not the Mimic, which is a debate on its own. But one last thing I want to bring up is that Springtrap shares lines with some of the other animatronics from Ultimate Custom Night.
You will not be spared. You will not be saved.
You will not be spared. You will not be saved.
I could see this as some evidence telling us that William or even a part of William escaped this nightmare and is back. That's why we're hearing familiar lines he heard over and over as he was being tortured. But again, this is just some idea I wanted to throw out there. Now, in general, we can use the other animatronics to answer mysteries from later games, like with Tangle or the Blob, as one of the most popular theories around this character suggests that the remnant and shells of the animatronics from FNAF AR are what's fueling the Blob we see in Security Breach and in Ruin. This is why we see animatronics like Circus Baby and Funtime Freddy when they should have been Molten Freddy and Scrap Baby. But as a whole, although a few animatronics are harder to solve than other ones, and we might be able to use them to solve other mysteries with the animatronics themselves, Special Delivery does tell us everything we need to know about them, leaving this mystery as 100% solved. Now looking at the second mystery, the emails. There are actually a good amount of different emails throughout this game, and I've already gone over a few of them in the animatronics section. So instead of going through all of them one by one, I'll summarize the main points of these emails that mainly tell us about two things, Vanessa and the glitch. With the first set of emails, we learn about an IT employee of Fazbear that has been emailing someone by the name of Ness about their alarming search history that has caused concern. Now these are crazy things being searched up that I pull up on screen here that Luis funny enough thinks are for a movie being made by Ness. I think these search histories are slowly showing us how Ness, or now as we know as Vanessa, is slowly diving into madness. These are violent searches that I use when talking about Springtrap, as of course that someone I discussed was Vanessa, who if they're already being controlled by the Glitchtrap virus, it's this virus corrupting her mind to become just like William, and to bring it back with Burntrap and possibly even with Springtrap. Most importantly, from the set of emails, we also find out she is trying to push a virus packet into the systems as _Pizzaplex with IT credentials he actually stole. So Vanessa is actively trying to push what is most likely the Glitchtrap virus. With the last set of emails, Luis ends up saying this to Vanessa. Please let me know you're okay. There's a package here for you from a fabric company. Are you making a costume? This is directly setting up Vanessa suiting up as Vanny. This fabric suit would become one of the new faces of the modern games, and this was all teased thanks to FNAF AR. Looking at the next set of emos, they are in a way following up Vanessa posing as an IT worker. Here, a tech contracting company for Fazbear Entertainment, which is most likely responsible for working on the new animatronics and on the special delivery technology, get a virus sent to them through an animatronic. With this email, we learn that one of the employees had to remove the shelling of an animatronic, which is unknown, and would then take the circuit board from said animatronic, and they would then have the team upload it onto their computers. This would of course lead them to finding a virus on their systems. This scares them, so naturally they contact V_A from Fazbear, who is the IT person, to help them. They apparently clear out the virus entirely and are able to isolate the virus into one place before completely eliminating it, essentially saving the company. But then out of nowhere, the animatronics are being controlled by someone else and their safety features are turned off by said person. The company freaks out and have no idea what to do, and this is when we stop seeing emails from them. Now there are a few things worth mentioning about these emails. First, what animatronic contained this circuit board with a virus? At first I thought someone like the Mimic himself would make sense, but this email specifically highlights having to remove the shelling with a power tool, meaning it can't just be an endoskeleton. Another idea is that it could be a vintage Spring Bonnie prototype animatronic or really any old other animatronic that still exists containing this virus. Or it could just be some random animatronic that Vanessa would plant a circuit board that already had the virus as some sort of trap, since she is of course V_A. Now the other question is, what is this virus? The reason I bring this up is because in Help Wanted, which takes place before this game, we learn how a contractor for Fazbear sent vintage circuit boards to the VR team so could then be uploaded into the game to speed up the process, which is how Glitchtrap came to be. But this does not match up with the description in FNAF AR, so are these two separate viruses? Well, the way I view it is that the virus described in FNAF AR is just a strain of the Glitchtrap virus. Vanessa would make a copy from the original and would then give it to this new company. So they're both Glitchtrap, and who knows how many copies of this virus actually exist. Like in Help Wanted 2 and in Ruin, where many believe that Helpy is a strand of the Glitchtrap virus and had a role in freeing the Mimic. With Vanessa being able to control the animatronics, what if this was most likely to hurt and maybe even murder people? Maybe it's these animatronics she used to kidnap and kill the other children seen in Security Breach in one of the endings, as we know there are other missing children. With the final set of emos, we really only get more information on how the glitch is infecting Fazbear's systems and kicking people out of their computers and etc. The other main takeaway is that an email highlights how Vanessa was promoted to head of security, a fact also highlighted in Security Breach, where other employees found this strange because she didn't have the required qualifications. So both these instances once again point us to the CEO, who is the one that even made this decision. But as a whole, we know exactly how every major point from these emos would pay off in the form of Glitchtrap and Vanessa as Vanny, leaving this mystery as solved. Moving on to my personal favorite mystery and probably the most complicated one, Golden Freddy. Now there are a couple of different ways that you could view this character and where their story ended. I'd say that most people have the belief that there are two souls inside the animatronic, one being the crying child and the other being Cassidy. The crying child would most likely be freed in the Happiest Day event, while Cassidy wouldn't necessarily move on and would continue to torture William Afton in a purgatory or nightmare that is Ultimate Custom Night. This is also the last time we saw Golden Freddy, so like Springtrap, how and why are they back? When first taking a look at their design, it's pretty different from any other iteration of Golden Freddy that we've previously seen. It's the closest in design to the FNAF 1 Golden Freddy, but even then it looks new and shiny, which leads me to believe that it is a new animatronic created by one of the partner companies for the delivery service. So if this is a new animatronic, then why is it clearly possessed or haunted? In the actual gameplay portion, when you're trying to shock him, he twitches, makes your screen glitch, seems to actually be teleporting unlike the other animatronics that only go invisible. The head of Golden Freddy flashes on your screen similar to FNAF 1, and we even see the infamous "It's me" message also flashing on your screen. But that's not all. On the promotional material, like in the teasers and trailers, we see the letter C, like in the teaser where someone that starts with the letter C is sending us a message. So could this C stand for Cassidy, one of the souls inside Golden Freddy, which to me would confirm that not only is the animatronic possessed, but that Cassidy is also coming back. Here she would return to stop William, who at this point has also come back. Cassidy would just possess whatever Golden Freddy animatronic was made for the service and would begin her hunt for William. Now this is definitely a strong possibility and would make sense for the most part, besides one thing. Why don't we see Golden Freddy anywhere else in the modern FNAF games? In Help Wanted, Golden Freddy is notably missing. We don't even have a cameo or reference to this character. Now you could argue that they do come back in Princess Quest, which was in the mobile port of Help Wanted, in the form of the princess, as in Security Breach the princess was originally named Cassidy in the game files. However, this was quickly changed, which could suggest that she's not supposed to be Golden Freddy and is instead another character like Vanessa. But you know, my reboot of Help Wanted, they are the same, which you should totally check out here. I know, another shameless plug, I'm sorry. In Security Breach and in the games that follow, it's also hard to argue that they have any role. Sure, you could say that they're present through other animatronics or characters, but why isn't there a direct return as it is in FNAF AR? Why would we only see her through parallels or something else instead of just seeing Golden Freddy? Especially if you want to argue that William comes back in the form of Burntrap in the real world. Well, another idea I came up with is that this new animatronic and its programming is simply mimicking Golden Freddy. See what I did there? Just like Toy Bonnie or Mangle, Golden Freddy would actually believe it's the original animatronic. It could even be a situation similar to the VR Help Wanted game, where that game was being fed information from Fazbear Entertainment. So what if Golden Freddy's program was fed all of the information they had on this animatronic, information that most likely described it as haunted or possessed? We already know the general public knew of Golden Freddy thanks to the newest book, Ticket to Fun, where in the crossword puzzle using the UV light, it revealed kids quote-unquote saw another Freddy, and that the hidden word reads Golden. So this wouldn't be Cassidy returning. A Golden Freddy isn't possessed, it's just the programming acting that way. But trust me, this theory also has its flaws, like the "it's me" flashing on your screen, or just the details in general that makes him seem possessed. My best explanation is that illusion discs are totally at play. But for a final mini theory or possibility, what if its programming was similar to the circuit board that contained the glitch trap virus where, for the theory's sake, William's soul was possessing the circuit board. Here somehow her soul could possess the golden Freddy chip we see here using the same reasoning as before, coming back to hunt William. Or again, somehow, which I know is a little lazy to say, but this is just throwing an idea out there that I don't even know I would fully call a theory. What if its programming itself created some supernatural virus similar to glitch trap? But now I want to look at another version of Golden Freddy in this game that's also part of the DLC we'll talk about next, Great Escape Golden Freddy. Here design-wise, Great Escape Golden Freddy is similar to the base Golden Freddy, still being yellow but with a darker shade. His head is also withered, which reminds me of his FNAF 2 design. It's also worth noting that his eye sockets are completely empty, with holes going through the endoskeleton head, since I think this can be an answer to his possession or not. There are chains running around his body, which I'll come back to later, and his legs have 2 balls and chains on them, keeping him from really moving. So what's special here? Well, I think a really cool and interesting take on this Golden Freddy comes from Retrospective in the video We Miss Lauren FNAF Special Delivery AR, FNAF Theory, which I'll also bring up in the DLC portion. Here not only does Retrospective go over the clear connections to another carnival from the series, but they also come to the conclusion that this is Cassidy returning once more for this DLC. Because Great Escape Golden Freddy is inside this tank of water, obviously trying to escape, Retrospective draws connections to the drowning story from the Tales from the Pizzaplex novels, where a girl who gets trapped in a VR water park experience attempts to be drowned by a ghost girl who's trying to pull her into the water. Many theorize that Cassidy is the ghost girl because of the strong correlation drowning has with his character. Of course, there's a connection to the Ultimate Consequences ending from Ultimate Custom Night, where Golden Freddy or Cassidy drowns themselves in this red lake after talking to OMC, which is what ends this minigame. I also want to bring up how we might have seen the results of this in the Help Wanted Dreadbird DLC. Here there's an Easter egg where the sky and lake next to you both turn red, which already looks like the Ultimate Consequences ending. Then there's a chance that Dreadbird will rise from the lake and will continue to walk all the way to the bar next to the player. So what if Dreadbird is actually Cassidy rising from the lake being given a new life? This would technically be Cassidy returning in Help Wanted, which would then lead to AR where she's back in a Golden Freddy show looking for William. But looking back to this video, they bring up more connections to Cassidy, drowning, and OMC like in Ruin with these caves, and even a connection to this Glamrock Freddy statue. At the end of the Carnival DLC, we see a broken Golden Freddy on the ground with the chain still running across his body, and at the start of Ruin, we see this broken Glamrock Freddy statue on the ground with chains wrapped around their body, just like Golden Freddy. Now this could just be a parallel, or this is the game's way of telling us that Cassidy is still present in the modern lore in games like Ruin. But finally, Ritos comes to the conclusion that the reason Cassidy is even vengeful is because she was drowned by William. The way she was murdered is what made her vengeful and different from the other children, a pretty interesting theory. When looking back at the design itself, what if this tied up Golden Freddy that even seems trapped is to tell us that that's exactly what's happening to Cassidy? Because William is still roaming around somewhere, Cassidy instinctively has to follow him and try to maybe stop him. Like this Golden Freddy, she can't escape. Even after we defeat Golden Freddy, we get this cutscene that I already went over, but at the very end, his eyes still glow blue. Remember, this Golden Freddy doesn't even have eyes or eye sockets, so how are their eyes even glowing? To me, it seems like strong evidence for possession and for something supernatural. The reason his eyes are still glowing blue is because Cassidy is trapped and still can't escape if William is at large, perfectly represented through this design. But this just brings me right back to a point I made earlier. If Cassidy really is back, then where are they? When looking at the mystery as a whole, this is the only thing stopping me from saying it's solved. If Cassidy is making such a prominent return here, why not anywhere else? But regardless, we can begin to theorize a lot about this character and make connections to past and future games that followed, which is why I would say that Golden Freddy is kinda solved. Now moving on to a mystery that I feel is even more forgotten than AR itself, the Dark Circus Encore DLC. As I said earlier, this was a DLC that could be bought for $20 when it was initially released, and would feature exclusive animatronics in this carnival theme setting. Here you had to face Ringmaster Foxy, Ballora, which is an interesting choice for this DLC, and Great Escape Golden Freddy, who I just went over. With FNAF AR in general, there are also just a good amount of carnival themed skins, like Magician Mango and Clown Springtrap, which is honestly one of his coolest designs that I'm surprised wasn't in this carnival DLC. When looking at the setting where gameplay takes place, it's your classic wooden wall, the bright lights and colors, circus design building. Some small things I noticed through gameplay videos, since we unfortunately can't play it ourselves anymore, are that there were frame photos of the 3 animatronics like this one of Golden Freddy, which makes me think that this was a dedicated booth to these 3 animatronics, and that there maybe could have been other booths in this carnival with other set of animatronics. Of course, course, there are also carnival props everywhere and props that are a part of the animatronics and their performance, like Golden Freddy's tank. But the DLC consists of completing puzzles in the carnival that will then lead you to one of the cutscenes of the 3 animatronics before having to complete a boss battle defeating them. I wouldn't really say the other 2 cutscenes possibly have some lore like Golden Freddy's did, since we're only really seeing the animatronics charging at us and then being defeated and destroyed, and none of their eyes light up. By now, hopefully all this carnival and circus discussion has reminded you of another certain carnival we first actually learned about in FNAF 6 and has continued to be referenced in every modern game since then, Fall Fest. We first technically saw Fall Fest and Pizzeria Simulator as Spookfest, but at this time none of us could imagine what this meant. Then we saw Fall Fest in the Help Wanted Dreadbird DLC. Here we learn that this DLC takes place within the Fall Fest carnival itself, as the game hub contains a banner advertising Fall Fest 1983. We then saw a poster for Fall Fest 1970 revealed in the Help Wanted 2 Games hub, as we can also assume that the carousel minigame and the carny minigame both take place in the Fall Fest carnival itself. In Security Breach, we found this arcade game of Balloon Boy which took place in a carnival, this poster advertising Fredbear's singing show. In Ruin, we saw these carnival animal mascot suits, and even the Mimic wore a carnival lion suit in the scooper ending. And now finally, with the latest game, Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic being released, we now have concrete information on the Fall Fest carnival and how it's connected to a certain fire. And a fire in Fall Fest is actually something we've seen happen a lot for some reason. In Help Wanted, we were introduced to Grim Foxy in the Corn Maze minigame, a fiery version of Foxy that some can see as the aftermath of a fire. Then in Help Wanted 2, both the Carny and Carousel minigames result in a fire. In the Carousel level, after completing the hard mode of a fire will begin to burn around you and will slowly consume the attraction. And in an outside view of this level, we actually see that the fire started from this barn to the side and slowly made its way to the player. With Carny, after completing the FNAF 2 level, Dreadbird's arm will snap off, causing sparks to go flying, which will then result in a fire. Carny and the surrounding attractions are then slowly consumed by this fire. And finally, in Secret of the Mimic, we learn of Edwin Murray, owner of Murray's Costume Manor, who is a contracting business for Fazbear Entertainment. And we learn that his wife, who also had a large part in this company, Fiona Murray, died in a Fall Fest fire. We know this because of voice lines where she traveled there for some unknown reason and never made it back. And because of details in the Moon.exe minigame where we find a burned Fiona statue in front of a Fall Fest globe. And because of Big Top from this game, as he tells us that Fall Fest took Fiona. So we honestly know a lot about this fire, but how does all this relate to FNAF AR? Well, this was actually pointed out to me in Raito's video that I just talked about, that there are a lot, and I mean a lot of explosives or fireworks in this carnival area that could have easily led to some fire. We don't literally see a fire happen, but the comedic amount of explosives made it seem like one was gonna happen at any moment. So there are a couple of things we need to answer. First, is this event actually Fall Fest? If so, which one? Well, for me, it's just hard to believe that this wouldn't be Fall Fest. Why make this carnival themed DLC if it wasn't to point us towards a certain direction? Now, at the same time, I can also see the argument that this is in a way a parody event, just like in FNAF Help Wanted, which was brought up by Rightos. This would make fun of the quote-unquote fictitious events of Fazbear's past, like Fall Fest, and the fact that there was ever a fire. However, this would also mean that animatronics featured in this DLC, like Golden Freddy, might not be real, which is something I have a hard time agreeing with. But for the sake of theorizing, let's say that this is a real Fall Fest event, which could mean that this is modern Fall Fest. We've only really learned about Fall Fest events from the past dating back to 1970, but it is very likely that it also exists alongside modern locations and pizzerias. In the Tales from the Pizzaplex novels, which I know is a debate on its own in terms of their canonicity, we learn about an annual autumn carnival-like event that takes place alongside the Pizzaplex. So could this be our first look at Fall Fest that takes place right before the Pizzaplex is opened? Which is only further evidence that someone like Golden Freddy is still around in the modern timeline. But another way to look at this is of course that it takes place in the past, anywhere from 1970 to really 1987. So what if we want to say that this somehow takes place during the fire that killed Fiona? Something else I should mention is that it's believed that William Afton was responsible for the fire that killed Fiona, due to evidence like in the Carny level where the hard mode of this level takes place after the fire. Here everything around you is burned to the ground except Springtrap, who is the main threat here, suggesting that after the Fall Fest fire, William would be the only one who survived. So here in Special Delivery, William could have possibly started the fire from where a bunch of explosives were already laid out for him. He would light them all before getting away. In the carousel minigames, we can even go as far to say that this barn to the side where the fire even starts is actually the building from FNAF AR, filled with different animatronics and would just be another attraction to the carnival as a whole. But this is a bit more far-stretched, I will admit. Another cool thing to point out from Raito's video video is their theory that because we see Ballora, assuming this DLC takes place in the past, this could suggest that the fun times actually happened much earlier in the timeline than any of us had thought. This is from its own theory by Rightos that the fun times actually came from Fall Fest, which would again take place way earlier in the timeline. And now the FNAF 2 movie could even support this in a way, where we of course saw Circus Baby herself in William Afton's workshop, who even appears to have green eyes, meaning she is possessed. This presumably happens very early in the timeline, even before the missing children incident, again suggesting the fun times were invented earlier than any of us could have imagined, which has its own complications. But back to this mystery, we definitely know more about Fall Fest than we did at the time it was first released, but it still feels like we're missing a dedicated game to this event, like one that takes place in the modern timeline. It just feels like we really need one more project to really answer questions we all have, which to me leaves this mystery as kinda solved. Now moving on to the final mystery of the list, we have Remnant and Shadow Bonnie. In the franchise, we can describe Remnant as a type of energy substance infused with the souls and memories of those who possess the animatronics. Before this point, we would only get references here and there, but it never took center stage like it did here in FNAF Special Delivery. As described earlier, Remnant is described as bright lights around you that you need to collect using your flashlight to draw it in. We're also warned of a shadowy remnant that is trying to guard the remnant, which of course we know is Shadow Bonnie. Remnant is then used to power up the animatronics, so what is there to solve? Well, I think first this game just flat out tells us that Shadow Bonnie is pure remnant, not an illusion or a real animatronic, but just a shadowy remnant. This is something we've theorized for a while, but this game finally confirms it, and I think it's the exact same reason why we don't see Shadow Freddy. Shadow Freddy and Shadow Bonnie have always been associated together, so why not this time? Well, I think that Shadow Freddy is an actual suit and animatronic, and not just remnant like Shadow Bonnie. And just when comparing their designs, a Shadow Freddy seems to have some texture and is more purple than just a shadow. Even in the FNAF movie, which I know is probably its own continuity, here we see Shadow Freddy as a real animatronic suit that Max gets stuffed inside of. So I think FNAF AR single-handedly ended the debate of Shadow Bonnie and might even prove to us that Shadow Freddy is not made of remnant. Another thing worth noting is that all this means that Fazbear Entertainment openly and actively knows of remnant as if it's just some casual thing. We can theorize William knew of remnant somewhat early on, and that it played a part when making the fun times and maybe also had a role with some of his murders. So at the same time, we can also assume he wasn't just giving this information out to everyone like Henry or even to his family. So how does his own company end up finding out? This is like my 4th time doing this, but it could be someone close to him who would come back to form the LLC of Fazbear and would create the Pizzaplex. Someone who would need remnant. But besides this, where did all of this remnant come from? Remnant is soul energy that most likely comes from murdered people, so that would mean all this remnant we're seeing here had to have come from somewhere. As I theorized earlier, could this remnant have come from murdered people used in Springlock experiments, or it's the remnant from the other missing children that we learn about in one of these endings, or it's even remnant from employees of the Pizzaplex that we also learned were murdered. There's a lot of possibilities, and I'm surprised where this remnant came from wasn't explored further. But what does this all mean for Shadow Bonnie guarding the remnant? Well, what if he's acting as some sort of protector over remnant that would come from children? A parallel to how the puppet was supposedly the protector over the other murdered children. It's hard to find some other explanation besides that they would want the remnant for themselves for some reason, but I like the idea of him being some sort of protector as it fits better with the FNAF narrative. But that's really all we have to look at, making it the shortest mystery on the list. Sure, we can look at other theories around remnant in other games or projects, but really for this video, I just wanted to look at remnant in this game and what it tells us. And in my opinion, it's pretty straightforward with us about what it is and what it's doing in this specific game, easily allowing me to say that this mystery has been solved. So with all that said, have we solved Five Nights at Freddy's AR Special Delivery? Well, we have 5 mysteries, 3 of them are solved while the other 2 are kinda solved, meaning 60% of this game has been solved, which is a pretty good ratio in my opinion. We can compare that to the 33% of Security Breach that was solved, which honestly was less than I was expecting, and 77% of Help Wanted that was solved, which makes much more sense to me. Now before I beg you guys to subscribe, I want to talk about cut content. Some of you may have noticed that I do bring up cut emails from this game and in a sense treat them as canon. The reason I do this is because the emails tell us a story, and I feel that removing a small part of that story like a cut email, ultimately the wider story itself stays the same. So for example, even if the email where Vanny receives the suit was cut, we still know she becomes Vanny and would have to be handed the suit one way or another. But I totally understand if you disagree with using cut content, and usually I wouldn't, but here I just think it still works. So with all that said, have we solved this game? I'd say yes for the most part. There are some mysteries that we still haven't solved, but the majority of the game is, and how it connects to future projects. Intermission time, halfway there, and we still have a lot left to discuss, including the bonus content near the end of the video, so stay tuned. But I wanted to take some time to say thank you all for the massive support on the channel, and to everyone up here on screen who stayed to the very end of this video and commented down below a secret phrase. None of this would be possible without you guys, so again, thank you. Also make sure to check out the latest episodes to the Silver Platter podcast and other videos on the channel. But let's get back to it by now looking at FNAF Security Breach and Ruin. For an overview of the history of Security Breach, it really started with FNAF AR and Help Wanted. Special Delivery introduced us to emails between employees of Fazbear's Entertainment that included someone by the name Ness, and most emails were about a virus infiltrating company computer systems. Of course, we all know how this would pay off later, but most importantly, our first real teaser was at the end of the Help Wanted update. When walking outside this store, instead of following Glitch Trap, you would find the Pizzaplex under construction with a billboard from Fazbear's Entertainment right in front of it that read, "Now hiring." We would then get teaser images that included our first look at the Pizzaplex, the 4 main Glamrock animatronics, and even Vanny. We then got our first teaser trailer September 16, 2020, showcasing the Pizzaplex and the franchise's supposed new villain. We would then get 2 more trailers on January 12, 2021 and in February of 2021, before we'd get our final trailer on October 27th of that same year, revealing the release date and various aspects of gameplay. Finally, on December 16th, Security Breach was released, with its fair share of issues that I'm sure you've seen be discussed by now, but of course, what people were also talking about was the lore. And to give you a history lesson on the lore of Security Breach, here's Neo Nobody.
FNAF Security Breach has a eventful history when it comes to theorizing about its lore. With this game came a brand new generation of FNAF fans, which also was a brand new generation of theorists, along with MatPat seemingly heading the way towards any general fans' basis of the lore. You also had newcomers Mr. Naff, and also Tall, Dark, and Toasty himself. But that aside, Security Breach took a while for the theorists to fully wrap their head around, because you had rooms that looked like this, combined with gameplay that looked like this. But eventually MatPat threw his hat into the ring with the Gregbot theory, the theory that Gregory is a robot version of the Crying Child. This theory, later shortened down to the nickname Gregbot, was very controversial and very memed upon in the community. A lot of people threw away actual evidence towards this theory just for the simple fact of, I don't like this idea, therefore it shouldn't be canon, therefore MatPat's wrong. But over time, people did begin to accept it, and nowadays in the FNAF lore, many new theorists are beginning to build off the framework of MatPat's original theory. But this wasn't game theory's only robotic revelation in Security Breach, as they also claimed that Vanessa could be a young adult robot version of Elizabeth Afton, in the same way that the Silver Eyes had a young adult Charlie Bot, although this theory is overall less well known and less accepted than Gregbot. And to complete the Afton sibling trio, a lot of people quickly agreed that Glamrock Freddy was possessed by Michael Afton. And as if we didn't have yet enough weird Afton possessed souled shit up in here, then let's look down here instead in the Burn Trap ending with William Afton once again being risen from the dead. And he apparently grew an arm. For a while, a lot of people assumed this was the canon ending, probably because it was the only ending to not end with a fucking comic strip. This upsetted a lot of people because it felt like at this point, fan service without any story importance. Why the fuck are we seeing this man get risen back from the dead? Like, we all get that's his thing, but come on, pal, your time's up, buddy. Luckily, later on, with the release of Ruin, we've all since concluded that Princess Quest is the most likely canonical ending, and it seems like we are finally putting Afton to rest and making way for our new main antagonist, the Mimic. Wait, so, Burn Trap isn't William Afton? Is he just the Mimic? Don't worry about it. Nobody really knows. As 2022 continued, Scott released a brand new book series called Tales from the Pizzaplex. This was sort of the spiritual sequel series to Fazbear Frights, with both books seemingly paralleling, or at least giving clues and hints towards the game's lore. Scott has later gone on record to say that this book series was also to sort of course correct after the weird lore mistakes and mishaps that Security Breach brought to the community. And I love how Scott's version of course correction just involves baobab trees and fucking hallucinogenic gas. Scott, it's okay. You already introduced sound illusion discs. You don't need that. You don't. Tales from the Pizzaplex actually did wonders for the FNAF theorists, solving actually very controversial questions at the time, such as who is Patient 46. With this new information from the books, it seems like Gregory was also once under the control of Glitch Trap, and just like how he plays Princess Quest 2 free Vanessa, it seems like somebody must have played Balloon World to free Gregory. And this wasn't the only security breach revelation from the books, because in those same books we were also introduced to the man of the hour, the Mimic. The Mimic was an invention made by Edwin to take care of his son David Murray. At the time, a lot of people, including game theory, just assumed that Edwin was a parallel to Henry Emily's character. John FNAF proceeded to add on to this theory, thinking that maybe the Mimic's code is actually Glitchtrap's identity. And maybe, just maybe, we could trace the Mimic all the way back to this scene in Sister Location. This chip right here, possibly containing the Mimic's code. Everybody thought that these new revelation of theories practically solved Glitchtrap and his role in Security Breach. But everything changed when the Ruin attacked. The original teaser we had for the Ruin DLC showed the Pizzaplex in, well, her ruin, but it also showed off this almost ghostly looking girl, with the artwork's lighting making it seem like she has blonde hair. Everybody immediately assumed this was someone along the lines of like a ghost Susie, or like maybe a robot version of Elizabeth Afton. But in a surprising turn of events, it actually ended up being Cassie, the daughter of Bonnie Bully. And throughout the game, she is lured deeper and deeper into the Pizzaplex by the Mimic. I mean, Gregory, obviously. Can't you tell? It sounds like Gregory. It's Gregory, duh. Only to reveal when she goes down to the deepest depths of the ruined basement that it's just the Mimic all along. And yeah, this was the most obvious twist ever. Did Steelwool purposefully make this so fucking obvious? To escape the Mimic's clutches, Cassie goes up an elevator, only for Gregory to cut it, sending her all the way back down to the Mimic. But considering right once Cassie is going up the elevator, the Mimic is just sort of left standing there right next to the elevator's battery itself, it does seem like this is less likely to actually be Gregory and more or less the Mimic mimicking Gregory, possibly trying to set up Cassie for a future villain arc, making her the new and improved Vanny. We also had little hints towards future games in Ruin, such as Cassie's dad and his role in all of these whole Mimic shenanigans, along with some never before seen costume suits, which we now know were hinting towards Secret of the Mimic. However, seeing the Mimic in the flesh, or the metal, made a lot of people question the canonicity of the Tales from the Pizzaplex books. But in terms of the history of the lore, that's pretty much it. But do these theories still hold up nowadays? Have we actually solved Security Breach? Well, let's ask Bronze Films to find out. Bye bye.
Thank you, Neo, and everyone make sure to check out his channel. So now that you basically know everything about Security Breach, now we can look at a list of mysteries that I think make up the majority of the game and whether or not we can solve them. I know this list can be debated, especially since there's so many smaller mysteries with this game, but to me these are at the core of the game and its story. So I'll do the same when we get to the Ruin portion of this video, a list of 10 different mysteries. So number 1, a mystery that is technically 3, who are these guys? The game centers around Gregory, Glamrock Freddy, and Vanessa or Vanny. This game clearly points importance to each of these characters in different ways, which comes with mysteries like possession, parallels, are they supposed to represent characters from the past, or are they literally the same people we knew of before? All things I'll discuss soon. Number 2 and 3 I'm grouping together. Who is Burntrap and the Blob? They both had major roles in the Burntrap ending and acted as new villains for the franchise that we honestly know nothing about. Each character has its own debate with the community, with Burntrap definitely being the one that fans can't agree on. Number 4, the Sticky Note Room. Now this has been theorized about ever since this game was first released for its odd and almost random nature. Even now it's hard to find a reasonable answer to who or what was down here writing dozens and dozens of messages on sticky notes. This room has heads of Nightmarian staff bots, and whoever was down here even made a staff bot recreation of the Afton family. I know, crazy right? Number 5, Princess Quest. Although these arcade machines seem pretty straightforward in every FNAF installment they're in, the main question lies with the princess herself and her true identity. Number 6, Patients 46 and 71. Although we have a good idea of who they actually are, what's confusing is what we learn about both of them and how it connects to the greater FNAF lore. Number 7, what role does the Afton family play if there's any? Now you can look at this mystery in a number of ways, like if they're actually alive, are we only seeing parallels to this family, or will they have a role in a future FNAF game? But mainly I want to look at if they're still here and especially where. Number 8, the Nightmare staff bots and plushies. Now this is arguably the most random and confusing part of this game, that we are still looking for an explanation, especially because they have continued to have a role in new FNAF games. So what are they? Are they important, and what does it all mean? Number 9, Sun and Moon. Now this was an entirely new animatronic introduced that the game pointed a lot of importance to, one we would even see reappear in multiple games. We saw a number of connections to other characters and animatronics, but why? Number 10, the endings. There are a total of 6 different endings to be unlocked, some animated while most of them are in a comic book art style. It was heavily debated which ending was canon, and even now it can be up to someone's interpretation. So now that we have our list of 10 mysteries, we can start to go one by one answering which one has been solved, which ones we have a really good idea about but can be debated, and lastly the ones we still know absolutely nothing about being unsolved. Alongside answering if each mystery has been solved, I also want to bring up videos from theorists that can be fundamental to helping our understanding of this game. So starting with the easiest ones that I think we can say have been solved by this point are the endings, Sun and Moon, and the Patience. Now for the longest time it was assumed that the Burn Trap ending was canon because it was the only animated ending and it seemed to be directly connected to the Pizzeria Simulator ending, with Willie Mathon coming back as Burn Trap and the other animatronics returning in the form of the Blob. Then when Ruin was being teased, we saw the Ruin Pizzaplex, suggesting that the events of the ending where the Pizzaplex collapsed on itself during the fire were canon. It was believed that Gregory and Freddy were of course stuck down in the sinkhole because the elevator could only be used once, and some believe that these wires in the teaser belonged to the Blob and that he would be the main antagonist. But then, as Ruin was released, it made it clear which ending was canon in 2 different ways. The first is through comic book drawings Cassie finds that were drawn by Gregory. We find drawings of the 5 different endings, which is the game's way of telling us that these endings are not canon. And one of those drawings was about the Burn Trap ending, specifically this moment as the Blob is about to grab Burn Trap. Then before you reach the sinkhole, you find the princess's sword through the arcade machine with the image of the glitch out virus right behind it. This seemed to follow the events of the Princess Quest ending, with Gregory completing the arcade machines, freeing Vanessa while escaping with her and Glamrock Freddy's head. Although it still can be argued which ending is canon, especially with some arguing Burn Trap has still had a role as the Mimic and that the Pizzaplex could have only collapsed on itself after the fire. As of now, Ruin seemed to have confirmed through drawings and Easter eggs that the Princess Quest ending is canon, officially solving the first mystery. Now looking at Sun and Moon, like I said, this character seemed to be important, but it was hard to say exactly why. In Ruin, Eclipse even had the same teeth as the Mimic, which made a lot think that he came from the same time period as the Mimic and that they were closely related. So when FNAF Secret of the Mimic was released this past June, it proved exactly that. Here we learn that Edwin Murray, owner of Murray's Costume Manor, a contractor who made Fazbear's Entertainment ideas mechanically possible, was responsible for creating the characters Sun and Moon. There is even a Moon mascot section of the game that has its own mysteries. We even got more lore with Edwin being a parallel to Moon in the Moon.exe minigame. And that is why Fiona represents the sun, with her icon even showing up above F10 N4 or M1, which was designed to mimic her. If you even want to break it down by smaller mysteries in Security Breach, this game even explains why other random animatronics show up, like Monty, Roxy, and DJ Music Man. They were all originally created by Edwin Murray, but were repurposed decades later by Fazbear's Entertainment because they legally got a hold of Edwin's wide catalog, when his company ultimately failed. So although I think more can be said about Sun and Moon and that we'll continue to learn about them, their backstory and meaning alongside existence of other characters has definitely been solved. When looking at the final solved mystery, this one's pretty straightforward but also pretty controversial, the patient CDs. Through CD collectibles, we learn about 2 patients seeing therapists with their sessions being recorded, patients 46 and 71. Patient 71 is clearly Vanessa, as the game explicitly tells us that. We learn about how she is basically being taken over by the glitch trap virus and that multiple therapists are seemingly disappearing. With patient 46, their identity is hidden, but we do have certain facts to help us identify who they are. We know they have hacking abilities, are most likely a child, and have a close connection to the Pizzaplex. And of course, the person who comes into your mind may be Gregory. Now there are other theories to who this could be that include but are not limited to Charlie, Elizabeth, and even the Crying Child. Oh, and most of these theories revolve around robot children, which is something I'll mention later. But then, with the tales from the Pizzaplex novels, we learn about GGY, who has the same hacking skills and is closely connected to the Pizzaplex, who is probably but most definitely Gregory. This seems to point us back to Patient 46, the exact same traits, and the novels just give us more context to this character who can be seen as the antagonist. Now before you go commenting that the books aren't canon, don't worry, I know, and it's something I strongly believe in. But I still think we can use them as supporting evidence to back up claims, especially when these books have strong connections to characters from the games and it takes place in the exact same setting as Security Breach, but again, not canon. So we know who both patients are, and whenever we have theories about Vanessa or Gregory, the consensus is that the CDs can be used as evidence to learn more about their characters. And now we can look at the next set of mysteries that I'm going to label kinda solved, as a lot can be debated within them. Starting with my favorites, who are Burn Trap and the Blob? Now these are mysteries I made a ton of videos on, and you've most likely seen them being discussed by amazing theorists. With Burntrap, the main argument is whether he is William Afton coming back once more, or if he is the Mimic mimicking William Afton while wearing a corpse and springlock suit. The evidence towards him being William are pretty straightforward. Burntrap shares a similar design to all of William's appearances, and a decaying corpse within a spring bunny suit. You can see his flesh like Springtrap or Scraptrap. Burntrap has purple eyes with purple smoke coming out of his charging station that is presumably keeping him alive. Burntrap is found in the sinkhole in the Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, which is of course the same location where Pizzeria Simulator took place, where William was burned and supposedly killed. This also means that Glitchtrap is William as well, with his agony or spirit possessing a circuit board, where he would infect the Help Wanted game and Vanessa. Vanny would then bring him physically back as Burntrap. With the argument of him being the Mimic, most of it lies with the novels, Ruin, and even with Secret of the Mimic. The Mimic shares physical features with Burntrap. When looking at their legs, they both don't match. Both their left feet only have 3 toes, both of their left arms have 5 fingers, and they both have a similar pose with their left arm is raised but their wrists are flat. In the books, we learn that the Mimic wears a mascot suit with a person already inside of it, causing the person's flesh to fuse with the Mimic, and for the mascot suit left over on the endoskeleton. When you picture it, this is exactly how Burntrap would look. The flesh is from the person and the suit would have come from the mascot the person was wearing. In Ruin, it would also explain why Burntrap is notably missing, as we know the Mimic was designed to mimic others. And a video I want to highlight by underscore how Ruin secretly solved the Burntrap debate, which I'm sure you've all seen by now, and if you haven't, please do, because it's honestly just amazing. But it highlights how a claw mark that is found in the vent next to Burntrap's room is also found in the vent leading to the Mimic's lair. This claw mark also perfectly lines up with Burntrap's hand, suggesting it's the same hand as the Mimic and that he was the one who left it here in both locations. We even find a similar purple glow effect in the Mimic's room, just like we do when Burntrap is revealed. So after Security Breach, Burntrap would crawl through this vent, would lose his corpse and springlock suit, and would then be trapped in this room by Vanessa and Gregory, where he would leave another claw mark, again making these two the same. So when looking at all the evidence, it can truthfully go either way, and I'm sure many of you watching this video are still split on the topic. It's just one of those things that still hasn't been answered, and I don't think it will unless we get new information with a new FNAF game. But we do have solid evidence for both sides that doesn't leave this mystery completely unsolved. Now with the Blob, there's much more possibilities than just 2 sides. Some of the most popular theories include that it's Molten Freddy from FNAF Pizzeria Simulator fused with scraps from the Pizzeria and Pizzaplex, creating a new amalgamation animatronic. But the issue here is that Molten Freddy was burned in that fire, and that parts like the Funtime animatronic shouldn't technically exist, since by this point in the timeline they were already together as Molten Freddy, and parts from Circus Baby should have been Scrap Baby. Another popular one from Game Theory that was released only months after the game was released is that the Blob is made up of animatronic parts from Rockstar Row, and the agony from the Pizzaplex is fueling it, which is why the puppet is missing her tears and why we see Funtime animatronics when they should be parts from Molten Freddy. Other theories are that it's made up from agony from murdered employees in the Pizzaplex, or that it's even an entirely new antagonist. More recently, theorists like T-Dreads have connected the mystery to Secret of the Mimic into the Storyteller tree, suggesting that the Blob is the game's version of Storyteller, or that the Blob is actually F10 and 4 engulfed in wires that are actually controlling and are all over the Pizzaplex, acting as a power source or a hub for the Mimic AI. The animatronic parts could be explained by the FNAF 3 map found in the prototype Pizzeria, as this prototype location would be where the Blob is currently residing in. So if this map was here to tell us that we were near this prototype location, the Blob could have easily gone there and gotten masks of different animatronics. Personally, I suggested that the Blob was made up of the souls of the 7 technicians from Secret of the Mimic who failed to retrieve the Mimic schematics and were killed by him. The 7 souls would line up with the 7 animatronics making up the Blob. But like with Burntrap, it's just one of those things where we have no concrete information, and it could honestly go either way. Even in Ruin, when the Blob showed up again, it was only for a slight second and it didn't tell us anything about the character itself. But because we have some ideas, Burntrap and the Blob are kinda solved. Now the Nightmare Staff Bots is a mystery I'm sure you've also seen be discussed by now, a strange recurrence of a character that wasn't even supposed to be canon. We saw him in a Help Wanted level, officially making him canon to the universe, also meaning Fazbear's Entertainment knew of his existence. We would continue to see Nightmarian in Security Breach through the Nightmare Staff Bots with the message, "In your dreams." This was accompanied by Nightmare plushies hidden around the Pizzaplex almost as if they were watching us, and we would continue to see them in Ruin, but why? Well, now most of the theories revolve around the Mimic, and more specifically how they could be representing each other. An amazing video I want to highlight, which is actually a new one, of FNAF The Ultimate Nightmarian Theory by FNAF. Here he goes over how Help Wanted was being mimicked into the Pizzaplex by the Mimic program, which includes the Nightmarian staff bots, as it would have been mimicked from Nightmarian from one of the minigames. He brings up a lot of great connections to the Silver Eye book trilogy into the games through parallels, and he suggests that Nightmarian represents the Mimic itself. Through scrap content and Secret of the Mimic, we learned how all of the mascot's jump scares were supposed to include a Nightmarian's jump scare sound effect, not just Jackie. He also brings up how the placement of Nightmarian staff bot heads in the sticky note room would represent the physical mimic, and that the server room filled with puppet-inspired wires would represent the virtual mimic virus. So I think it's clear that Nightmarian is connected to the mimic and to the mimic's origins, but it's still something where the meaning can be seen as vague and we still don't have all the pieces to this mystery. But for the last kinda solved mystery, what's up with the Aftons in the Pizzaplex? Like I said earlier, you can tackle this mystery in a number of ways, with the first simply being parallels. Burntrap or the mimic represents William, Glamrock Freddy represents Michael, Gregory represents the crying child, and Elizabeth represents Vanessa. Or you could take this literally, with William coming back again, Michael possessing Glamrock Freddy after the FNAF 6 fire.
I found myself for the first time when I cleared the path.
The crying child would return as Gregory in a sort of robot child situation, which I'll come back to later. And Vanessa would also either be a robot or it's actually Elizabeth returning in some way. Or it's a mix where some return and some don't, where people like Michael Afton could still be alive working for the new Fazbear's Entertainment, while Vanessa's actually a new Afton we never heard of until now. Each possibility has its own set of evidence, with the two people who come to mind who really explore the possibilities being Game Theory and ID's Fantasy. Of course, Game Theory brought up Miss Afton and a role in trying to bring back the Afton family, while ID's Fantasy had a couple theories on different members. And even most recently, she revisited Glamrock Freddy and Michael in this video. But one of the main issues is that with each new addition to the franchise, it seems to stray away from the Afton family. Ruin introduced the Mimic, which kinda eliminated William from the picture. Help Wanted to continue to dive into Glitchtrap, where at this point the consensus is that he is the Mimic. And of course we got Secret of the Mimic, a whole game dedicated to the Mimic and a new family, the Murrays. But at the same time, the Aftons are still very much present. In Secret of the Mimic, we got emails from WA or William. We basically got confirmation that Edwin's mansion later becomes William's home, as David's room is almost an exact copy to the crying child's room. And it seems that Michael might have a role in the next FNAF game, which might have Abyss in its title. I made a whole video going over the teasers leading up to this game and a new hour-long ambience video released by Stewwool. During this video, slightly altered tracks from Sister Location played, which included Demolition Inevitable, Michael's infamous theme. This could suggest that Sister Location and Michael will have some role, with fans theorizing that Cassie survived the elevator fall at the end of Ruin and that the elevator fell into the Sister Location bunker, where Cassie will have to navigate her way through Circus Baby's entertainment and rental just like Michael did. And if he is really alive, he could show up and help her out, as in Ruin, Gregory does mention some mysterious friend before their name is cut off.
My friend has access to the building maps. Just follow the instructions.
But now I'm just rambling, and it could just be as possible that he died in the FNAF 6 fire. So this just leads us right back to the beginning. Yes, it's clear the Aftons have had some role in Security Breach, but this could mean anything. Which leaves us with dozens of theories surrounding this family's fate. And now looking at mysteries that I would consider unsolved, let's start with the princess. The Princess Quest arcade machines have had a role ever since Help Wanted and have continued to have a role all the way until Help Wanted 2. It's clear Princess Quest was one of the ways to defeat the Glitchtrap virus and to more specifically free whoever was under his control, where in this case it was Vanessa, but the actual identity of the princess has remained a mystery. This really cool video by Rightos, who needs no introduction, explains the possibility of the princess being Cassidy or Golden Freddy. Originally, the game's files included the name Cassidy for the princess sprite, which immediately made people say that the princess was Cassidy. Rightos also draws connections to Cassidy possibly being represented in the Tales from the Pizzaplex novels as a parallel to the story Drowning. And the fact that Golden Freddy is in every single game where William is made it weird that they wouldn't appear in Security Breach, where William clearly is. Other theories suggest that the princess could be anyone from Vanessa, Charlie Emily, and Cassie from Ruin. Although we have theories on who the character is, the story seems to focus on the arcade machines themselves and how they're connected to Glitchtrap or Vanessa. So no clear intention to explore this character further leaves this mystery unsolved. Now looking at the sticky note room, which like many theories is still being debated to this day. Probably the more confusing part of this game, the simple question is who was in this room? A great example of a theory that really acted as a sort of pillar to other theories is Game Theory's FNAF the clue that almost solved everything. This video builds off his Gregbot theory, which don't worry we're about to cover, where Gregory is the crying child reborn as a robot, as the sticky notes tell us his story about the crying child coming into consciousness and remembering his past, like his birthday party or the bite, which is why we see the Afton family staff bots as it's him trying to recreate the family he lost. Most theories from here honestly are about robot children or the idea of something gaining consciousness. A lot of new theories suggest that it's actually the Mimic, and the sticky notes are about his past with the Murray family or him trying to mimic the Aftons' lives. Even more now when we have the Mimic mimicking David as a child, which lines up with the childish drawings and notes in the room. But we still don't have concrete evidence to who this is or what this room really represents, and I don't really ever think we'll get a concrete answer. Finally looking at what I call the big three, who are Gregory, Glamrock Freddy, and Vanessa. Cause yes, this mystery is different from the Aftons. I briefly talked about Vanessa being Elizabeth Afton, a new Afton, or an entirely new character. The similarities between Elizabeth and Vanessa can't be a coincidence, and it could be the reason Glitchtrap chose to take over her life. We learn a lot about her character through the CDs, but still her identity remains a mystery. She clearly knows more about the Pizzaplex and Fazbear's than we've realized, because her, alongside Gregory, trapped the Mimic in this room and must have known about him previously and just how dangerous he really is. She might also know more about Mexis, as she either reactivated this machine to keep the Mimic trapped, or as some believe, she's the one who moved it here. She also has a connection to the Princess Quest minigames, which can be interpreted in a dozen of ways. It would be weird for Steelwood to introduce a character that clearly has narrative and visual similarities to past games and characters, only for them to actually be someone entirely new. But even then, without a clear idea for the community to theorize and build off of, her character has remained as someone we know is important, but unclear to where the franchise is going to take her and why. Now, Glamrock Freddy is a character with even more possibilities to who they are, and I think it's the one the community can't really agree on. A few ideas include possession by Michael Afton, Henry Emily, Charlie Emily, or even the Crying Child, which is an idea I honestly lean towards. Michael and Henry were both down in the FNAF 6 fire, and either of their souls could have wandered off into Freddy. While with the Crying Child and Charlie, it can be argued that their personalities are very similar to Freddy. Charlie would act as a protector as the puppet to the other souls, just like Freddy acts as a protector to Gregory, stopping him from being a victim to Vanny like the many others. On the other hand, it can be seen that Freddy is scared just like the Crying Child is in FNAF 4. He's almost scared of Vanessa the same way the Crying Child was of the animatronics and with his older brother Michael. He is also missing his head in Ruin, which could be a parallel to CC losing his head in the bite. Ruin Freddy also resembles Nightmare Fredbear, which is another way CC is represented. But if none of these souls are possessing Freddy, it could simply be that his AI is different from the others. In Help Wanted 2, we learn that the Glamrock Endos were trained in the same room where Glamrock Freddy was trained and essentially raised. So maybe here his AI was trained with the information of any of the actions or with different tragedies from the past. Which is why his personality seems similar to characters we've known of before. There are also newer theories on Glamrock Freddy like this one by Minibyte Games connecting Freddy to F10 and 4. However, these are still just theories and the games don't seem to lean towards any definitive conclusion. But it does seem that Glamrock Freddy will return and maybe we'll finally get an answer to his identity. Finally, let's look at Gregory, where this single image from game theory revolutionized theorizing and ideas about this franchise. I'd say the biggest theory around Gregory is of course him being a robot child and actually being the Crying Child, an idea brought up in Game Theory's video, FNAF Don't Trust Gregory. MatPat brings up points how Gregory doesn't have a guest profile and how he's most likely living in the Pizzaplex, how he stutters when Freddy asks his name, his physical appearance that resembles Crying Child, Freddy's comment on how Gregory is broken, instances in the books where children are rebuilt into robots, and how Gregory's vision almost glitches out when Vanny gets near him, since her presence would be disrupting the feed of his robot eyes. This idea has even been further explored in a new theory by T-Dreads, which I'm sure you've all heard about by now, where T-Dreads proposes that David Murray from Secret of the Mimic, Gregory from Security Breach, and the Crying Child from FNAF 4 are all literally and narratively connected. He highlights connections between David Murray and Gregory, like how both are seen sitting on the same hill at the future Pizzaplex land, connections between David Murray and the Crying Child, like how they both have neglectful parents and have the same house and toys. This all leads to the idea that William Afton is trying to recreate David into the Crying Child, attempting to copy Edwin Murray's invention. Of course, I recommend checking out the full, almost hour-long video to get the full context. So based on these theories, I would actually label Gregory as being kinda solved, but as a whole, being connected to the other two major characters from Security Breach, finding an answer for all of them seems somewhat impossible, or at least not yet. That leaves us with 3 mysteries solved, 4 mysteries kinda solved, and 3 more mysteries unsolved, and we haven't even gotten to Ruin yet. Now, I did talk about the Ruin DLC a lot, but this is definitely its own project with its own set of mysteries that we need to dissect. So, to give you a brief history on Ruin, let me introduce a good friend, Unnamed Security Guard.
Hey everybody, I'm Unnamed Security Guard, a new FNAF theorist and former security guard, and Bronze has asked me if I would be willing to do the Ruin section of this video, and as you can see, I am more than happy to. So, without any more ado, let's get right into it. So, to give the briefest of overviews, Ruin opens with a girl named Cassie as she jumps down into the ruins, of the Pizzaplex. She pauses to call out for Gregory, saying she got his message, but after getting no response, she continues down into the main lobby, next to Rockstar Row, and deeper into the Pizzaplex. As she is walking in, she hears a static noise in the distance by the elevators and starts to go towards it. When she gets there, she finds a Roxy talkie with Gregory on the other end, saying he is trapped in a sinkhole under Roxy Raceway and she needs to come find him. As she continues, she finds a Fazwatch, much like her dad's, and uses it to open doors and deactivate the security nodes of the Mexis system after being told by Gregory that for him to escape, all of the security nodes need to be deactivated throughout the ruined Pizzaplex. Near the end of the DLC, she makes her way into the sinkhole and under the ruins of the FNAF 6 Pizzeria where, after completely deactivating Mexis and breaking through a concrete wall with a forklift, she climbs through, and the game reveals the voice throughout the DLC wasn't Gregory at all, but a new character called the Mimic, who moves to attack Cassie before Roxy pushes the Mimic away, buying time for Cassie to run away. This is where the game branches off into its 3 different endings. One of the endings, which appears to be the canon ending, is the main ending you get by successfully escaping the Mimic and making it to the elevator. After barely escaping the Mimic, the real Gregory explains how she was never supposed to go down there, how the thing in the sinkhole tricked her, and has been trapped down there, quote, a really long time. After saying how it isn't her fault the Mimic is free now, and knows she did it for him, before saying, quote, we can't risk being followed, he apologizes before the elevator falls in a complete freefall a moment later. After a long moment of silence, we hear Roxy say, Cassie, before the game ends. In what has been dubbed the Brazil ending, if you ignore Gregory's directions and take the wrong path during the Mimic chase at a particular junction, you will find a dead end with a Freddy cutout holding ice cream. If you put on the mask at the cutout before the Mimic gets to you, you see an image of Vanessa, Gregory, and Helpy on a hill, enjoying ice cream as music plays. Gregory says it's okay, and he found a spot to hide as a distorted voice of Gregory can be heard overlapping, and as Cassie's breathing becomes more and more panicked. It ends with a distorted voice of Gregory saying, keep going. The final and secret ending has been dubbed the Scooper ending. To get this ending, you need to find secret cameras at chapters 1, 3, 5, and 7, and look through them until a secret door opens in the video feed. When all 4 secret doors have been opened, you continue playing the game normally until the Mimic chase at the end. When you get to the final hallway that the elevator is at the end of, to the left will be a new path that is opened, and at the end of this new path, you will find a room with a button that activates a scooper that is in the main room that grabs the Mimic as it begins banging on the door. It pulls the Mimic into the smoke, and once it clears, the Mimic is laying on the ground, seemingly deactivated, and the game ends. So, that pretty much covers Ruin, so thank you guys for watching, and thank you Bronze for having me on.
Thank you so much, Unnamed Security Guard, and everyone please make sure to go check out his channel. So now we can look at the list of Ruin mysteries, which is a lot shorter, and go through the exact same process where most of these theories are going to revolve around the Mimic. Number 1 is the Mimic Glitch Trap. Now at this point you would imagine that Glitch Trap would finally be solved and that the answer would be revealed through the Mimic. Although there are connections, I want to look at all the possibilities and how it ultimately does matter to solving parts of Security Breach. Number 2 are the books canon. Now I think this is 100% the most controversial topic with the modern FNAF lore, and it's one that's been developing as the books and games have been released together. Are the books in a different continuity? Are they parallels or are they canon? I think the answer is clear now, so when I get there, please be nice in the comments. Number 3, which ending is canon? Like Security Breach, there's a couple of endings with each of them having some argument to being the canon one. Although we don't have the next game in the timeline to tell us which one was canon like Ruin did with Security Breach, I think we already got an answer. Number 4, what is this thing? Of course you may see the scooper and think immediately of the scooper from FNAF Sister Location, making these two the same and these two areas the same. Or it could honestly be something entirely new created by Fazbear's Entertainment, so we'll find out soon. Number 5. What is Mexis? Another part of Ruin that really confused the FNAF community was this simple supercomputer. Is it possessed by someone we used to know, or is it just a new character? Obviously this is someone important, and we might just be one step closer to solving who this is. So actually starting with the opposite from the security breach list, what mysteries are unsolved? Well, in my opinion, simply none of them, because Ruin was a continuation, because we now have 2 projects released after it, and most importantly, because Scott Cawthon and Stu will work together on this game making one coherent story, something I'll discuss later. We now have a really good idea of what Ruin was supposed to tell us, leaving only solved and kinda solved mysteries, starting with our first solved mystery, which ending is canon. To find an answer, we need to look at teasers that we've gotten over the past few weeks to what looks like to be Ruin 2. One of the main composers responsible for the incredible FNAF music, Leon Riskin, posted this teaser for an upcoming project named Forgotten Names and Faces, with the tags reading, "Who will catch you when you fall into the abyss?" This included brand new music, so take a listen. If it sounded familiar, that's because it has the same melody from Gracefully Into the Abyss from FNAF Help Wanted 2. It appears that this new project is an upcoming FNAF game in the franchise. The acronym for Forgotten Names and Faces spells out FNAF, and both songs seem to be centered around Princess Quest with the word Abyss in both of them. This has led many to title this new game FNAF Abyss or FNAF Into the Abyss. He also posted a song titled Fixing Elevators with the caption, "Elevators can't be trusted, take the stairs." The hashtags in the post also spell out Betty Lou Oliver, a person who holds the world record for surviving the longest elevator fall. All of this just screams Cassie and her fate at the end of the Ruin DLC. She tries to take the elevator to escape the Mimic, but either the Mimic or Gregory cuts the elevator, making her fall to her supposed death. But with these teasers, it suggests that she actually survived and that the next game will be FNAF Ruin 2, meaning Cassie is still down in the sinkhole alone with the Mimic and that the elevator ending is the canon one. Sure, this could change as we get more information and teasers, but so far it's heavily suggested that the bad ending is canon, meaning the sad ending where Cassie wears the Vanny mask in front of the Fredbear cardboard cutout revealing Helpy, Vanessa, and Gregory happily on the hillside, alongside the Scooper ending where the Mimic is scooped out of the lion costume, are not canon. The next solved mystery is the book's canonicity. Again, I can't reiterate how insane it was being in the community at the peak of this argument. You had both sides willing to put everything on the line to prove that the books were or weren't canon, specifically the tales from the Pizzaplex novels. There are a total of 8 different novels with tons of stories that have helped us to piece together the timeline, like with Didophobia that finally told us more about FNAF 4 and Sister Location. And of course, other stories like GGY really made some consider the possibility of the books being in the same continuity as the games, as Gregory would be GGY. We were seeing more and more connections between the two, with what really made the topic so controversial being the Mimic's appearance in Ruin. This was of course a major antagonist in the books, so finally seeing them in the games made it seem like this argument was over. But of course you could have said that this was just a parallel, and this was even something I believed in. But then with the FNAF Help Wanted 2 update released in December of last year, it really seemed over for the book deniers, as not only did we see the Mimic, but we saw the Tiger Rock plushie for the first time in the games. This tiger plushie belonged to David Murray from the books, as the Mimic would even get a plushie of his own. Up to this point we only knew of the plushie and the Tiger Rock animatronics from the books, but now this was a major character that existed inside of the games, confirming the Mimic's backstory and that he wasn't just a parallel. I even made a video about this update saying that we can no longer deny the book's canonicity. In the update we even saw what seemed to be Edwin Murray's company and the factory from the books. So the final nail in the coffin was Edwin Murray himself being mentioned in the Secret of the Mimic trailer released in February of this year. At this point it was undeniable that the Mimic and Edwin were canon characters and not just parallels to characters like Henry. And as we'd get more teasers or images for this game, a large part of the community could finally agree that the books, or at least part of the books, were canon. So finally, this debate was put to a rest.
It is lonely down here.
Wait, what? What are you, a computer?
Okay, you know what, never mind, I am doing a 180 on what I just said. The books are definitely not canon whatsoever, right? Although the main points from the books did transfer over to the games, like the Murrays and the Mimic's backstory, what didn't were the specifics of the story and how it impacted this game alongside the rest of the lore. There are a couple of things that were just different, but a perfect example is Fiona, wife of Edwin Murray and co-owner of Murray's Costume Manor. In the book, she dies giving birth to David and doesn't have a role in his life. But here Fiona was very much alive for the first couple of years in his life, and it's implied she died at a Fall Fest fire. And her absence in David's life is why Edwin created the Mimic and M1, a program designed to mimic Fiona. M1 is then transferred into the supercomputer F10 and 4, which may or may not be Mex's, something we'll discuss soon. And even now it's theorized that F10 and 4 still has a role in the modern lore as I discussed earlier. So honestly, this detail alone should be enough to say that the books in their entirety are not canon to the games. Sure, you could argue that parts of the books are canon, but with how Secret of the Mimic structured the Murray family, which did differ from the books, I do think it's safe to say that the books are not canon, solving this mystery. Now looking at the first kinda solved mystery, what is Mexis? Mexis first appeared as a secondary antagonist to Ruin. Whenever you'd wear the Vanny mask for too long, he would appear and send an animatronic after you. We learned that Mexis was designed to keep the Mimic contained, so when Cassie deactivates the computer, the Mimic is free and you know the rest. We then saw him in the back of this van in the Help Wanted 2 update, as inputting the code 4625 Mexis would come out of the computer before the van would speed off. And most recently in Secret of the Mimic, we kinda saw Mexis again. Like I mentioned, we were introduced to this supercomputer in the FNAF 1 prototype pizzeria. Design-wise, it may lead you to believe that this is Mexis. But of course we know this is F10 and 4. If anything, this game suggests that there are two supercomputers, F10 and 4 and Mexis, which we know stands for Mechanical X-Form Experimental Storage Number 1, or also known as the Cradle program. That's right, Mexis is the first supercomputer, while Fiona was most likely the second computer made. Based on this information and the text logs, we can assume that Edwin designed these computers to store the different Mimic programs. After David's death, Edwin would move M1 into the F10 and 4 computer, and after M2 would become violent, the plan would be to move the program into Mexis or use it to contain him like it does in Ruin. The only issue here is that Mexis was the first computer, so why would Edwin move M1 into the second computer and not Mexis? Unless he had Mexis as a first backup computer in case M2 went rogue, but this seems unlikely. It could also just be possible that these are somehow the exact same computer, meaning M1 is Mexis. But this also seems unlikely, and the game suggests that there are actually two separate systems. So although we know Mexis is a separate computer than F10 and 4 and that it was created by Edwin, this still doesn't explain the Blue Rabbit character we face in Ruin. This is where the theories can honestly go either way, with it simply being an AI, someone's consciousness, or being possessed by a character. If it is possession, this could be anyone from William Afton because it matches the style of his characters, Henry Emily continuing to fix the mistakes of his past, as here it can be argued he had a role in Edwin's downfall which led to the evil Mimic. It could be Edwin trying to stop the Mimic, or really anyone else trying to keep him contained. I do think Secret of the Mimic finally gave us some backstory and context to this character, especially with it being an older computer from the 70s. But with the character itself, we still don't know anything about it. I do think it will have some role in the next FNAF game, as it seems like it's the only thing that can really keep the Mimic contained. So maybe Cassie and other characters will venture back to Mexis to reactivate it, and in that moment we'll find out who they really are. Something else I just want to throw out there, because I think it is a really cool detail, is the explanation to the Help Wanted 2 update where Mexis is taken away in this van, since it really didn't lead to anything. Well, when I was live a few months ago, one of the viewers gave a perfect explanation. Mr. 3D Gaming proposed the idea that this ending was representing Mexis in the form of the blueprint being in the data driver and it being taken away from the manor by Arnold. Arnold does escape with the Cradle blueprints and the parachute ending, and it's a thing that the Mimic takes back after stopping him from escaping. So instead of looking at this as something that literally happened, we can instead look at it in a metaphorical sense, where it was showing us the Secret of the Mimic ending, where Arnold attempts to escape with the Mexis blueprints, which is why we even see the van drive off in such a hurry, just like we did in the actual ending. But with more questions than answers, Mexis stays as kinda solved. Now looking at Glitchtrap, who is just as controversial as someone like Burntrap, who is this? Now I won't really argue about him being William, since most of the evidence is the same as him being Burntrap, with William so possessing a circuit board being uploaded into Help Wanted and then becoming Glitchtrap. Although this could be possible, I instead want to focus on him being the Mimic, which is a wide consensus among the community, and more specifically which version. With Secret of the Mimic, it introduced the possibility of Glitchtrap being M1, M2, or even M3, as some theorize it's a new Mimic program. One of the main differences with Glitchtrap that separates this design from the rest of William's appearances is the fact that this is a mascot suit and not a springlock suit. A difference that theorists like FNAF pointed out for the mascots having a much more important role than we realized and have continued to, and now of course we know that he was right with Secret of the Mimic, where mascots played a huge role like with Tiger Rock and Party Time Chica. So this fact alone convinces many, including myself, to say that Glitchtrap is the Mimic, and I was even surprised that we never saw the mascot suit itself in Secret of the Mimic. It could have been anywhere in the manor, and it does make a lot of sense as this would be something made by Edwin Murray. But again, now it just lies on deciding which program it is. If it is M1 or F10 and 4, this would mean that the program designed to mimic Fiona was uploaded into the Help Wanted game. So why would Fiona decide to now mimic William Afton and his actions? Well, this could be that it's mimicking the information of the game and of Fazbear's entertainment. The mimic program acts on the data it receives, so here it's taking in all the information of the game and of Fazbear's like the MCI, causing M1 to recreate it in one of the endings. So the mimic is simply using Afton's personality and face as like a tool. But with M2, it would be a scenario where the endoskeleton itself and a separate copy of its program exist at the same time and are working together. It can be argued that with the physical mimic being trapped, the virtual mimic is helping to get him out. M2 would be uploaded into Help Wanted, would represent himself as William and as Nightmarian, which I discussed earlier, and then he would take over Vanessa so she could help him with freeing the physical mimic. Now whether this be through Burn Trap or just releasing the mimic to be free in the Pizzaplex, Glitch Trap and the mimic are working together. It can also be argued that Glitch Trap represented himself as Helpy in Ruin and in Help Wanted too, as in this ending we see the player keep the Glitch Trap virus alive as we see him exiting this charging station. Helpy would have been using the player to complete tasks to collect these Fast Force toys, which is how Glitch Trap emerged from the charging station. But at the same time, in the other ending, which fans both regard as canon, we see Glitch Trap being destroyed by Vanny, freeing herself. So by the time Ruin happens in the timeline, Glitch Trap is most likely already destroyed, leaving just the physical M2 mimic. The last option is that it's a new program that can be known as M3. When M1 or M2 are being uploaded into the Help Wanted game, it could have manifested an entirely new virus known as Glitch Trap. But I would say this theory has the least supporting evidence, but like a lot of theories in this video, this brings us right back to the beginning. If Glitch Trap even is the mimic, we need to figure out which program it is since there are now two, and what this means for the rest of the lore. With Security Breach, solving Glitch Trap can tell us what direction Stewa was headed in terms of Vanny and even Burn Trap. This answer would also help us to make connections to the mimic and to other games like Help Wanted 1 and 2. So I think we're on the right path, but even then we lack a clear answer. For the final mystery on this list and video, what is the Scooper? Of course, one of the main questions is if this is the same Scooper from FNAF Sister Location. Now design-wise they're clearly different and the rooms they are located in also seem to be different, but there have been times where the franchise has changed the designs of characters even though they are meant to be the same, so could this be what's happening here? They seem to serve the exact same purpose, so this conclusion wouldn't be that far stretched. Or another way to look at it is through the Remnant Plex theory by She's Always Nervous, where it's suggested that this is a modernized Scooper by Fazbear's Entertainment used to extract remnant energy from victims that is then used to power the Pizzaplex and its animatronics. Of course, check out the full video because this idea is really cool and unique. In terms of the Scooper ending, we saw the Scooper scoop the mimic out of the lion costume, presumably defeating him. But like I said earlier, the elevator ending is most likely canon, which is why I think the Scooper will have some role in the next FNAF game. Like Mexis, it's clear the Scooper is one of the only ways to stop the mimic, so it might have a much bigger role in the future game where we could learn about its past. In Help Wanted 2, we did see the mimic wearing his lion costume and not just as his normal appearance in Ruin, maybe pointing some importance to the Scooper and its ending. There just has to be a reason the game didn't showcase the normal mimic. But in my opinion, this is a mystery that we can cover rather fast since most of it is just speculation. The Scooper doesn't appear for that long besides the ending, and although it is a mystery to be solved, besides its connections to Sister Location, we just have ideas about the Scooper. So with all that said, has FNAF Security Breach been solved 4 years later? I would say no, but we are definitely getting closer, and I think with the next FNAF game, we should have all the information to do so. Now I think one of the things that made it so hard to solve Security Breach was the production of the game. Through the Dako and Scott Cawthon interview, we learned that Scott Cawthon only gave parts of the story and ideas to Steelwood Studios, which left them having to work with what they had in creating a story that they believed was right. Scott Cawthon didn't directly say to put things in certain areas of the Pizzaplex or to make certain characters do this or that. Steelwood only had components of characters and a story. So ultimately, they didn't have a solid plot to go off of. Meaning Scott and Steelwood Studios had the same pieces telling different stories, which led to it feeling like we were solving two different stories. Like one that focused on the mimic while the other focused on the Aftons, or one that focused on Gregory while the other focused on Vanessa. This was fixed with later games, which is why it's so much easier to theorize and to solve them, the reason Ruin didn't have any unsolved mysteries. So I think this leaves us still trying to solve parts of Security Breach. If you want to look at things specifically, things we still have unsolved include Gregory, Vanessa, Glamrock Freddy, the Sticky Note Room, Princess Quest, Burn Trap, the Blob, the Aftons, Nightmarian, Glitch Trap, the Scooper, and Mexis. This might seem like a lot, but with a lot of these mysteries, I feel like we're so close to solving them and that all we need is a piece or two of the puzzle to finally get an answer. In terms of numbers, if we have 15 mysteries in total and only 5 of them are solved, we've technically solved 33.33% of Security Breach. But this list and what parts of it are solved can 100% be debatable, and this was just my take on it. But all these amazing theorists up on screen have played a huge role in solving this game, and I'm telling you guys, just one more FNAF game like Ruin 2 and we can finally solve Security Breach. Newer games are actively solving Security Breach, like with Secret of the Mimic and Help Wanted 2, giving us so much more information and context. Moving on, Help Wanted 2 was a crucial stepping stone for the franchise that included elements from the old games and lore, while also building off the modern games, building a clearer story. But 2 years later, has the story evolved with new additions to the timeline where we can solve every single aspect of this game? Well, let's find out. So taking a quick look at the history, we got our first teaser trailer on May 24th, 2023, showcasing the Sister Location elevator and the voice of hand unit before being jump scared by Ballora. This told us that Sister Location would have featured levels and characters, and there might actually be some lore to this elevator into why this game was so present throughout Help Wanted 2, which we'll get back to soon. Then on November 20th, 2023, we got the official gameplay trailer showcasing the story of this game alongside all the different levels and characters. Here we would be playing as a Fazbear Entertainment employee, finding our way with the choice of participating in different jobs like customer service, game testing, or technical support. These jobs are of course the different levels featuring new areas and animatronics that were missing from the first game, like the Pizzaplex from Security Breach and the animatronics from Pizzeria Simulator. But besides these two trailers, the setup for this game was simple. It was a sequel to the first Help Wanted and was the project released after Ruin. So we were all looking forward to how they would connect to each other and what this game would set up for the future. So to give you a recap of the lore, here's a good friend of mine, Var, who you should all check out after this video. Take it away.
Help Wanted 2 starts us off with a little speech about how Fazbear Entertainment is offering a new on-the-job training position for a future pizza professional. We're essentially hired within the VR game and are immediately thrown into the main hub area, where a cartoon Helpy is waiting for us on a big screen near the main hub, encouraging us to begin our tasks, which, similar to the first Help Wanted, are various Five Nights at Freddy's minigames. Most of the minigames this time relate to Security Breach characters, Sister Location characters, and Pizzeria Sim characters. I mean, this hub area even looks like it could be pulled straight out of Pizza Sim, because we even see the Gumball Swivel Hands machine, some of the Trash Gang, both of the Pizza Sim clowns actually. Maybe most importantly though, there's a talking hippo animatronic called Mystic Hippo who talks to us throughout the game, giving us hints and tips throughout our playthrough, and asking us vague questions while we progress through the story. As we progress through the minigames, we're awarded different prizes that give us a variety of animatronics to display, various arcade items like a Phaser Blaster, as well as various plushies and such. Aside of these fun interactables, Mystic Hippo will also offer very vague riddles where we can unlock more unique items, specifically memory plushies that seem to represent the original Five Nights at Freddy's cast, in addition to the puppet. These are arguably much more challenging to collect. As we progress, we'll also receive unlockable Fazbear Transformers toys that Helpy gives to us. Upon collecting them all though, we find that we shouldn't have, as we get a bad ending to the game where Glitch Trap then appears, coming out of a charging station, and Nightmare staff bots surround us and attack. We wake up as the mask bot from Ruin, literally in the middle of handing Cassie the Vanny mask. Then the credits roll. But that's not the full story because there are actually two endings to this game. One other item we'll unlock is an actual Faz Wrench, which looks just like the one Cassie finds in Ruin. We're able to use it to open a locked door in the hub area, and upon entering we find a fourth Princess Quest machine. Before we can interact with the game though, there's a poster on the wall that informs us we can take off our mask, where a big reveal takes place. We realize this whole hub area isn't what it seems, and putting our hand near our face, sure enough, we can remove our mask, where we realize we've been wearing the Vanny mask the entire game thus far. Removing the mask, we look around and see that we're actually in the pizza place from Security Breach that Gregory ventures down to in the Burn Trap ending. We can also complete a whole extra set of minigames without the mask on. Anyway, after completing a certain amount of minigames, this prompts Mystic Hippo to award us a purple coin that we can pop into the Princess Quest 4 machine, which upon playing through the game, we find ourselves literally put into the video game, the princess herself meeting us and handing us the sword to continue the journey. As we fight our way through the game, we eventually stumble upon 6 graves that contain the memory plushies we found earlier, one for each child from the MCI and then one for the puppet as well. Lighting up each grave in a specific order, the order being Chica, Foxy, Freddy, Bonnie, Golden Freddy, Puppet, triggers a hidden underground walkway which opens, and inside we find a chest containing a Bonnie mask which our player says looks familiar to them. Progressing onward, making it to the old man from the other Princess Quest games, we trade him the Vanny mask for the Glitch Trap plush. We then proceed forward where we find ourselves in the Sister Location elevator. Upon riding this elevator to our destination, however, the door opens to us suddenly being inside a gigantic claw machine, with Vanny staring into it at us. Suddenly, the moon animatronic flies over to us, waiting for us to hand over the Glitch Trap plush. We hand it over, and he swims through the air back to Vanny, where he drops it into the reward area, and she picks up the plush where it suddenly becomes Glitch Trap, holding him in her hand. He waves at her before she suddenly crushes him into a puff of green smoke. Then she looks at us, waves, and disappears from view. The credits roll shortly after this. This whole ending feels like an insane fever dream. So much happens in such a short time. A few other things worth mentioning are that some minigames take place at Fall Fest, and new characters like Carney are introduced. We also see a Fall Fest poster from 1970, and now that we have Secret of the Mimic behind us, I feel like I should briefly touch on the Help Wanted 2 update we got, teasing the game. First things first, Mystic Hippo mentions a gift awaiting us in the distant past. So we boot up one of the Sister Location levels where we were given a different memory plushie by typing in 1983. This time typing in 1979 gives us a white tiger plush, which now sits in our hub area. It's at this point that scrolling through the characters we can display on stage, we now find the Mimic wearing the lion costume from Ruin, and when we put him up on the stage, Mystic Hippo gives us another cryptic idea to throw something at the Mimic, so we throw something at this animatronic up on the stage where it then makes a sound, and a door opens. A new area has been unlocked for us. We go through this new door that's open and we're greeted with Jackie's box on a table. We wind the music box and everything goes dark. We then hear Jackie's voice say her famous "time to play" line. The lights come back on, and we now see the box is gone and only a double vision puzzle on the table where the box was. We go back through some of the mini games that we've played previously, hunting the pieces of the puzzle down now, and putting this puzzle back together. After we do so, a building appears nearby in the room. Anyway, in this room in Help Wanted 2, we are only able to see this when we're wearing the Vanny mask, but if we remove the Vanny mask, we instead see a van. The back doors of the vehicle open, and we see the Mexis machine inside. The Mexis machine appears to need us to type a code into it. So putting the mask back on, we see the number 4625 on the mailbox near this building that appeared. Remove the mask once more, type the code into the Mexis machine, the Mexis rabbit begins coming out of the machine after we do so, and then gets whooshed back in. The doors slam and the van drives off into the darkness really fast. After this, the credits roll, and that's where Help Wanted 2 left us, setting the stage for Secret of the Mimic. Hopefully that's a decent summary of the game, and with that, I will hand the mic back to Bronze.
Thank you so much, Var, and again, everyone make sure to go check out his channel. So now that you basically know everything about Help Wanted 2, and now we can look at a list of mysteries that I think make up the majority of this game and whether or not we've solved them. I know this list can be debatable, especially since there are so many smaller mysteries within this game, but to me these are at the core of this game and its story. So number 1, who are we playing as? The protagonist of a FNAF game has always been the topic of discussion, and it's no different here. There is 100% a deeper story to this mysterious character, one that even connects to the old FNAF lore and can answer different mysteries from the timeline. Number 2, we have the endings. There are only 2 endings with this game, but they both have significant lore importance and seem to build off of each other. So which one is canon? Are they both canon? What do they set up for the future and tell us about different characters? Number 3, Princess Quest. This is actually a mystery I've discussed with most modern games because this arcade machine has some role every single time, and here I'd say it has the most important one. This is the last time we see this Princess Quest arcade machine, and it wraps up its own story in a satisfying way that we'll get back to soon. Number 4, Sister Location. Like I said in the intro, Sister Location has a suspiciously large role throughout this game, but why? What is this trying to tell us? What lore do the modern games have that is connected to Sister Location, and will Sister Location continue to have a huge role? Number 5, the memory dolls and tragedies. These memory dolls of the 5-man animatronics have a role in the secret ending and are more important to how they're collected into what they mean. Why are we yet again seeing correlations to the old games into one of the most important tragedies from the franchise? Number 6, Mystic Hippo. This was a new animatronic that almost acted like Candy Cadet, giving us cryptic stories and lore that are almost most definitely connected to something greater. So what is she trying to tell us? What do these cards mean, and will we see this character again? Number 7, Candy Cadet. This is actually his 3rd appearance in the franchise, following his appearance in Ruin, telling us a story about the Mimic. Here he also of course gives us stories that I'd say are harder to decipher but still important to this game's lore. Number 8, Fall Fest. Now Fall Fest has a huge role here and builds off the idea of a certain fire happening there that we finally learn more about in the latest FNAF project. So can we finally solve Fall Fest? Number 9, the content update. Last year we got an update filled with tons of lore that directly teased up and set up the next FNAF game, Secret of the Mimic. So a year later, do we finally know everything this update was trying to tell us? So now that we have a list of our 9 mysteries, we can start to go one by one answering which ones have been solved, which ones we have a really good idea about but can be debatable, and lastly the ones we still know absolutely nothing about. Alongside answering if each mystery has been solved, I also want to bring up videos from theorists that can be fundamental to helping our understanding of Help Wanted 2. Starting with the first mystery, who do we play as in Help Wanted 2? With these modern games, the lore adds a lot of importance to these protagonists, even if we regard some of these characters as unsolved like Gregory. Even with Secret of the Mimic, we find out we play as a character character named Arnold and got voice lines from this character, where fans are already theorizing how he could have some role in the modern timeline. But here it's theorized by most of the community that we play as Cassie's dad. Now our first piece of evidence actually comes from Ruin, where we can find this sticky note showing that he left her alone at some point to go somewhere for some unknown reason. And this somewhere is of course revealed in FNAF Help Wanted 2, which takes place before Ruin. In this game we follow a person who is completing tasks in the virtual and real world. It's believed that this person ventured down to the sinkhole and to the remains of the FNAF 6 Pizzeria to complete the final Princess Quest arcade machine to free Vanessa, and like I said, this person is none other than Cassie's dad. We know this because he also has a fast wrench like Cassie described, Carney says he looks old enough to have kids, and in the bad ending we see Cassie's dad mind transferred into a staff bot by Nightmare Staff Bots, the same staff bot from the beginning of Ruin. In this ending we see the same moment from Ruin when Cassie finds the Vanny mask, but this time from the perspective of the staff bot, meaning Cassie's dad is now inside of this bot and he was the one who handed his daughter the Vanny mask. Then in the good ending we follow Cassie's dad attempting to finish the final Princess Quest machine, and it's assumed he actually has an obsession with finishing them. In FNAF Security Breach we find messages of an exit interview of an employee who is accusing the company of hiding something in the arcade machines. He talks about the glitch machines and how he has to save the princess, as there's also this earlier maintenance log where he says he completed the first 2 machines. So it makes sense he would want to complete this last one as he's obsessed with finishing the last machine. While playing the final arcade machine there's an Easter egg that also reveals Cassie's dad is the same character as someone from FNAF 4 we haven't seen since then. After completing some levels you will find these gravestones with plushies next to them, and after lighting them in a specific way a secret stairway will open, and there you will find a chest. When opening this chest, inside is a Bonnie mask with the message, "This looks familiar." So it's believed that her dad is the same character as this boy wearing the Bonnie mask from the FNAF 4 ending who is known as Bonnie Bro, meaning that the reason the mask is so familiar is because it's the same one he wore on that night, and it's also why Cassie says that Bonnie is her dad's favorite animatronic. I'd say this idea is the one the community widely agrees on, but as you can imagine, Secret of the Mimic brought in a new contender, Arnold. This comes from a good friend of mine and from the video titled I Finally Solved Help Wanted 2, FNAF Theory by VAR. He brings up how this game makes connections to Arnold and his story, connections to F10 and 4 and how she fits in this story, and even connections to Mystic Hippo, which I'll get back to when discussing her character in her own category. Of course, check out the full video as it's honestly really convincing. So we have a few possibilities with one being stronger than the other, but we still don't have one definitive answer. Secret of the Mimic only gave us another answer and didn't really support or add any evidence to the Bonnie Bro theory, which is why I would label this theory as kinda solved. However, I do understand if you'd argue the protagonist is solved, but because it can still be argued it can be a couple of people, I'm gonna keep it as kinda solved, the first of the video. Now moving on to the second mystery, we have the endings and which one is canon. As VAR went over, we have 2 endings with one being regarded as the bad one and the other as the good ending. Now we know that one for sure happens, and that's the bad ending. This ending directly sets up the start of Ruin with Cassie finding the Vanny mask and it being handed down to her by her father. This is the ending we can all agree on. It's the good ending where there's some room for debate. A lot of people argue that they both happen, but this can easily be seen as an issue since they both seem to contradict each other. In the good ending, we help Vanessa to defeat Glitchtrap and free herself, but how could this be possible if he's freed again in the bad ending? Now here you may be wondering why he would even need to be freed again. Well, how I see it is, he was of course released into the VR game in Help Wanted, then he would infect Fazbear Entertainment alongside Vanessa. But in Security Breach, after Gregory completes the first 2 machines, a part of Glitchtrap would be defeated and in a sense trapped. So here the player collecting the different Fast Force toys which could represent the code of Glitchtrap, he is again freed as his arm leaves the charging station. So then how is he crushed by Vanessa? It doesn't work in any order either, because if he is crushed first, then how are we releasing him again? Would it just be another version of the glitch? Or if we free him first, the player is then stuffed into the staff bot and couldn't go on to complete Princess Quest. Another way to look at it is through Helpy, where this game makes it known that Helpy guiding you through this game is most likely Glitchtrap disguising himself. That's why after the good ending, Helpy is no longer seen on this screen, but in Ruin we do see Helpy. Like in this game, he's helping and guiding Cassie on what to do and how to make it to the sinkhole. So how is Helpy still in this game if the good ending truly did happen? To me, he should simply be gone like in Help Wanted 2. But at the same time, you could also bring up an argument for the good ending from Game Theory's video titled FNAF A Fragmented Memory Help Wanted 2. Here, MatPat suggests that both endings did happen, but that the good ending is exclusive to Vanessa and her freeing herself. She is only defeating Glitchtrap from her consciousness, but the rest of Glitchtrap is still around as we see in the bad ending ending and in Ruin. This could work, but the order of the endings would still sound a little weird, because this would mean the good ending would have to happen first, so then after freeing Vanessa, the player would be right back in the pizzeria and would then proceed to collect the Fast Force toys to free the rest of Glitchtrap. And on top of that, if you beat the arcade machine first, then it would have also been impossible to be trapped by Glitchtrap, since that requires the Vanny mask, but we saw him traded in the secret ending, meaning he would no longer have it. But if the good ending doesn't happen, it could be something where in the next game we're going to see Vanessa, Freddy, and Gregory venture down to free Cassie by completing the same princess quest from Help Wanted 2. A lot of fans are theorizing that Cassie will become the next Vanny, so this time we are going to see the what if ending where Glitchtrap was finally destroyed. Although there is some room for debate with the good ending, it happening or not can simply work either way. This can change with another project, but until then the endings are solved. Moving on to the next mystery, which will be a quick one, we have Princess Quest. I've discussed the same mystery in my Help Wanted 1 and Security Breach retrospective videos, where when taking a look at the arcades themselves, our answer will always be the same: they've been solved. Here we are given the final piece of the puzzle, as like I mentioned earlier, we finally completed the last Princess Quest arcade machine. We started with the very first version of this minigame in the mobile port of Help Wanted, giving us our first look at the princess and rabbit-like glitch. Then we completed the first 3 Princess Quest arcade machines in Security Breach, leading to the canon ending where we defeated the majority of the Glitchtrap virus and freed parts of Vanessa's consciousness. And finally in Help Wanted 2, we're completing the last machine, defeating Glitchtrap in the process, allowing for Vanny to destroy the last parts of his code, finally freeing herself. Now I would say the only thing we still can't answer about these arcade machines is who the princess is. I've mainly seen fans argue she's Cassidy because the name was found in the files, Cassie from Ruin or Vanessa herself, but regardless of who it is, the arcade machines told us a story throughout these 3 or 4 games that have finally ended here. So because of Help Wanted 2, which wrapped up this story, we can now confidently say that Princess Quest has been solved. Moving on, we probably have one of the most interesting mysteries on this list: Sister Location's role throughout this entire game. Sister Location appears a suspicious amount here, actually starting with the teaser trailer for Help Wanted 2, where it featured the elevator heading down to the bunker with Hyun making an announcement before being jumpscared by Ballora. Then in the game itself, Sister Location had its own folder of minigames like FNAF 1 through 4 had in the first Help Wanted game. Not even Pizzeria Simulator or Security Breach got their own folders. We only had animatronics from those minigames featured in different levels in folders based on different jobs like food prep and backstage, but these levels feature different moments from Sister Location we've already faced just now in the VR experience, like the breaker room with Funtime Freddy or crossing Ballora's gallery. There is even a private office room from the custom night game mode that we'll get back to soon. The first thing I want to bring up is where these levels take place and when. Now what I mean by that is that we all know all of the levels you can play while wearing the Vanny mask aren't real in the sense that they are false reality created by the Vanny mask. That's why when you take it off, the pizzeria is actually in its ruined state from the end of Security Breach and is not in the state it was in Pizzeria Simulator. That was just the fake reality the Vanny mask showed us. So this also applies to the minigames, where for example with the mask on in the Roxy Salon minigame, you saw Roxy in the state she was during Security Breach. Then with the mask off, you see Roxy in her state after Security Breach, where she's destroyed and is missing her face or mask. The player even gives her the exact same mask we see in Ruin, showing us how her appearance changed between 2 projects, and the Help Wanted 2 takes place before Ruin. So what would all this mean for the Sister Location levels? There is absolutely no change to how the areas or animatronics look after taking off the mask. Sure, some animatronics are being replaced by others, but it's not like the area itself has become ruined. And because we're still playing in the Sister Location bunker without the mask on, does this mean all of this is happening in real life? Well, I do think there is a strong possibility that this is what's happening. It's already been theorized that the Sister Location bunker is under or close to the Pizzaplex, and that most locations are actually all in the same area. So it wouldn't be that hard to believe that the player is traveling to the bunker like he would travel around the Pizzaplex. But what about the animatronics? Shouldn't they all be destroyed and in the form of Molten Freddy and Scrap Baby? Well, what if we want to go as far to say that the Pizzaplex actually created new or fixed the Funtime animatronics? I mean, this is something we already saw with FNAF AR, where a contracting company recreated popular animatronics like Circus Baby, Ballora, and Funtime Freddy for their special delivery service. It could even be these exact animatronics that were moved to the Pizzaplex before the events of Security Breach, and I think the tales from the Pizzaplex novels tell us why. Before I get flamed in the comments, yes, I know these novels are probably not canon, but I would argue we can definitely pull elements and evidence from them to use in the games. In the first epilogue, we learned how the abandoned FNAF 6 pizzeria was being planned to be turned into a museum and would be a new attraction below the Pizzaplex. So what if these Funtime animatronics were going to be displayed in this museum, the same as the museum above in the Pizzaplex known as Rockstar Row? So here the player is actually fighting against the Funtime animatronics, meaning the ending from the office mode and its hardest difficulty also had to have happened in real life. During this ending, Circus Baby will walk to your office and is here to deliver us a gift for completing the night. She'll then prop down, her stomach hatch will open where a hand will then reach out trying to give us an ice cream cone. After taking the ice cream and eating it, Circus Baby will stand back up before the night ends. This moment is obviously reminiscent of what happened to Elizabeth Afton, where after being left alone in a room with Circus Baby, she was lured with an ice cream cone before Circus Baby's stomach hatch would open and would scoop her into her stomach, killing Elizabeth and causing her soul to possess this animatronic. But this time the player was not scooped into her stomach, and in a sense we got the good ending. But why? Why are we fighting off the fun times? Are they possessed, for example? Here Circus Baby does have the green eyes, which we all relate to Elizabeth's eyes, meaning she is possessed, but this is all under the assumption that this is actually happening and isn't in VR. I like the idea of new fun times being around and a repaired bunker existing, which can be one of the locations we'll explore in the next FNAF game like in Ruin 2. This could even be why we see maybe the same scooper from Sister Location but upgraded or repaired for the Pizzaplex. But this all could be a huge stretch and there might not be any new fun times down there. However, what isn't a stretch is the elevator we see in the secret ending and its connections. This ending could have used any elevator for the player to take to the claw machine, but they used the same one from the trailer, the same one from Sister Location. Assuming we're being taken to Vanessa's consciousness or mind, is this telling us that Vanessa herself has some relation to this elevator? Or like some of us have theorized before, is it relating Vanessa back to Elizabeth? I've already gone over all the similarities between Vanessa and Elizabeth in a few videos, so this could just be more evidence connecting the two. Something where they are almost sharing a consciousness, something showing that Elizabeth is returning through Vanessa. Or it could be something where the elevator is connected to the player. If we are playing as someone like Michael, which is a theory on its own, we all know how this elevator would be connected to Mike. Or it could be related back to Circus Baby. Take a listen to this voice line.
I like it here. It's safe. Safe forever.
Before we dive into what this line means, let's look back to Night 5 of Sister Location, where Michael is instructed to remove this chip from Baby's arm. Where and what happened to this chip is also a huge discussion on its own. I recommend this great video that connects this chip to the Mimic and his role throughout this game and Sister Location in the video I Solved FNAF Help Wanted 2 by FNAF. But it's also theorized that this chip could be inside the Vanny mask, and it's the same chip inserted in one's brain like with what happened to Cassie whenever you wear the Vanny mask. This could be the exact same reason we're seeing this chip show up once more in Help Wanted 2 in the Repair Help You levels. The reason we're seeing it here is because the player also has a Vanny mask. Depending on what this chip is, if it is Circus Baby's code for example, this could tell us that she's in this VR world, and possibly also in Princess Quest. The reason we see the Sister Location elevator, simply a way to show us that she's still around. Or back to my theory on the fun times literally being back, this line we heard earlier and this chip could work as well. Circus Baby is finally in a safe place without William or anyone trying to scoop the fun times, since at this point the FNAF 6 pizzeria would be abandoned, and this chip would be moved into the new Circus Baby. But overall, for each of these mysteries or topics, there are a few ways to look at them with a lot of evidence backing up each one. We are still definitely missing a project that could expand on why Sister Location still matters, leaving this mystery as kinda solved. Moving on, let's take a look at these plushies or dolls of different animatronics. There are a couple of things to go over, so let's start with why Glitchtrap gives them to us. So first of all, I think that it's widely agreed that the plushies are memories and not the actual souls of those children. So it makes more sense that these plushies are memories and that they represent the acceptance of what had happened, but I'll get back to this in a moment. For now, I want to focus on why Glitchtrap is the one to hand us these memories. Now, every time we discuss Glitchtrap obviously depends on who you believe he is, so like most of this video, in the context that he is the Mimic and not a reincarnation of William Afton, this would mean that the Mimic is handing us these memories. But again, why? Well, if we can assume that the Mimic is trying to impersonate William Afton, then I think he's giving us these memories as he is trying to say or prove that he was responsible for the murders of the 5 children. These plushies represent Glitchtrap's code, and you can even go as far to say that they define the Mimic as Glitchtrap. You have to collect these dolls in order to move forward with the ending. Now, the reason I think this is all connected to the Mimic and not to Afton himself is because of the content update, where it's Glitchtrap handing us David's white tiger plushie. Like the victims of Afton, the memory of the plush makes up the Mimic and everything we learned about him in Secret of the Mimic as M2. But looking back to the plushies and now looking at their gravestones, it's widely believed that the player is lighting these gravestones in the order the children were murdered. He is giving these memories life and accepting the past. And by giving these memories life, he can start to look at his own past. Like I mentioned, after lighting all of the gravestones in the correct order, a secret staircase will open, and there this chest is available to be opened. Here's the Bonnie mask connecting him back to FNAF 4 and to the bite of 83, his own traumatic memory, and the reason Mystic Hippo asks us if we remember. Because the player is able to come into terms with the victim's past, he can then come into terms with his own past. So not only do I think he's giving life to theirs and his own memories, but I also think that this represents him finally moving on, as in the next segment of the ending we see Cassie's father trade the van vanity mask for the final piece of the Code of Glitch Trap. When the player is successful in the secret ending and in completing the last arcade machine, his final task is to get past the king, and he does so by trading Vanny's mask. I think the main reason he even gave up the Vanny mask in the first place was because he was able to move on from his past like I mentioned, so he no longer needed the mask. I'd say this game gives us all the information we need for these dolls in the theme of memories and what they can mean for moving on. Secret of the Mimic just gave us more information about the White Tiger plushie and why it's so special to the Mimic, so I think we can all say that these memory dolls are solved. Moving on, we have the newest addition to Help Wanted 2, Mystic Hippo. Mystic Hippo was a fortune teller that helped the player progress throughout the game. For example, she would tell us to take the key and to confront the darkness. The key was the Faz wrench, and the darkness was taking the Vanny mask off and facing reality. She is also the one to hand us the glitch purple coin after collecting all of the plushies, allowing us to play Princess Quest in the first place. So what is there to solve? Well, I think it boils down to her past and her connections to Secret of the Mimic. Now, the first thing to note is she actually had a button with the MCM logo, and in Secret of the Mimic, we find none other than a poster for Mystic Hippo. We don't see the animatronic itself, but this tells us she is a creation of Edwin Murray and comes from the early 70s or maybe even early 60s. But there is actually another hippo mascot showing that this design and character has always come from Edwin. But now I want to look back at Var's video on Help Wanted 2 that we talked about earlier. Here he goes over all the shocking similarities between Mystic Hippo and F10 and 4, suggesting that Fiona is talking to the player through this animatronic. I've said this a lot because it's true, but please check out the full video because these similarities are really convincing, and they only become that much stronger when suggesting the player is Arnold. Now, Mystic Hippo has this set of cards that act as its own game you can play. We have cards of Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, Chica, and Vanny. Notice the cool design on the back of the cards? Well, we find the same design and deck of cards in Arnold's van, which honestly blew my mind because they are literally the exact same. So could she be talking to Arnold? Well, she has this voice line telling us that the key I mentioned earlier is familiar to us. This could be because Arnold also had a data diver he used throughout the manor. And she also asks us this.
Do you ever look at your hands? I mean, really look at your hands.
This could be referring to Arnold's literal hands, the only thing that is visible throughout Secret of the Mimic, the hands that we all correlate to this character. Arnold as the protagonist can definitely work, or you can try to fit these voice lines to Cassie's dad. But either way, we know everything about Mystic Hippo. Sure, we could argue her true identity or who she is talking to, but what she reveals to us and where she really came from have definitely been answered, leaving the mystery of Mystic Hippo as solved. Now looking at one of the best characters in all of FNAF and his stories, we have Candy Cadet. Before we can even dive into solving them, take a listen to the two stories shown in Help Wanted 2.
Now I will tell you a story about a family that missed the most important opportunity in their lives. It was a limited time offer that included a family-style pizza with all their favorite toppings. It also came with a side of fries, mozzarella sticks, extra large soft drinks, and a toy surprise. It was only $49.99 while supplies lasted. They did not purchase the food and they all died. Now let me tell you a story about a young woman who, when she was little, was led into a dark forest by a witch and almost eaten. She had fallen for the friendly voice without discernment and was led astray. She had escaped before being thrown into the oven, but would have a scar for the rest of her life. When she had grown, she sought revenge on the witch, and entered the forest again willingly, this time with the confidence of age and experience. She was greeted at the mouth of the forest by a young boy who offered to help guide her through the darkness. She welcomed the help, and followed the young boy over the river, through the jagged trees, and toward a small house. "Come," the boy said. "Press here before killing the witch." The young woman was tired and would kill the witch in the morning. She followed the boy into the house. The oven door closed. the witch would finally have her meal.
There is a lot to unpack here, so let's start with the second and shorter story since I think we actually have an answer now with Secret of the Mimic. Now trying to solve who this family was always the biggest struggle. Could it have been Vanessa, Freddy, Gregory, and Cassie as their own family? Or was it the only other family we've ever known, the Aftons? And this would make somewhat sense since they did all end up dying, but what's missing is the big promotional event causing their deaths. Well, now we have a new family that fits with all these categories, the Murrays. Every single member of the Murrays has died. Fiona at Fall Fest, David either by getting hit by a van or by the giant moon prop in Storytime showroom, and Edwin was probably killed by M2 as we hear from his voice logs. And this important opportunity that they missed was Fazbear Entertainment, and more specifically partnering with them, giving them their products and catalog. MCM and Fazbear did partner with a lot of designs like with Chica or the FNAF 1 prototype animatronics. It wasn't until Fazbear or probably William found out about M2 and the Mimic design that they really wanted to take over MCM. Of course Edwin denied, and through voice lines we learned the extent William was going through to try and get his hands on M2. Because Edwin did not agree or quote-unquote purchase the food like in Candy Cadet's story, the Murrays all died. It's simple but sad. This was something we didn't have an answer to until now, and I think it works perfectly. With the first story, this one is still harder to solve, even with Secret of the Mimic, but I think the best explanation that we can all mostly agree on is that it's about Vanessa and Glitchtrap or the Mimic. Vanessa is the young woman tricked by the witch twice. I think the first time is when she's infected and Help Wanted, and then slowly becoming Vanny throughout FNAF AR. Now the second encounter could be Vanessa trying to fight back or resist the infection, which is something suggested in AR. But the young boy who could definitely be Gregory, who at this point is GGY before Security Breach takes place, which would actually be Glitchtrap tricking Vanessa once more to ensure the infection would work. And at the end of the story where the witch finally has her meal, it's Vanessa finally becoming Vanny. You could honestly look at it in slightly different ways, like replacing Glitchtrap with the Mimic, since we know he can change forms, and here he would change himself from the witch to the young boy. Either way, it's hard to not relate this story to Vanessa, and I honestly find it hard to connect it to something else or to someone else, especially since this game has a big focus on Vanny freeing herself from Glitchtrap in her story. We were even supposed to get voice lines from Vanessa helping to guide us through the game. So because we can confidently decipher both stories, this leaves Candy Cadet as solved. Now looking at one of my favorite mysteries that I feel like I brought up in every single one of these retrospective videos, Fall Fest. So I apologize if this all seems repetitive, but in Help Wanted 2, Fall Fest really does take center stage and seems to connect to a huge incident. This game would actually reveal a poster for Fall Fest 1970 revealed in the game's hub, so to me this meant we could assume that the carousel minigame focusing around Moon where you have to fix the carousel while avoiding him, and the Cardi minigame where you shoot at targets with a phaser blast for points both took place in the Fall Fest carnival itself. They even share a similar style and setting as the Dreadbird DLC for example, where we know it 100% takes place in Fall Fest 1983. So what? Well, in both Help Wanted 2 Fall Fest minigames, both levels end with a secret level where the attraction catches fire. With the carousel minigame you face Jackal Moon while fixing the carousel once more, but in the middle of the minigame a fire will randomly start engulfing the attraction and Moon slowly, but eventually you fix the carousel ending this section of levels. With the Carney minigame focused on FNAF 2, after completing the level like normal, the arm of the cardboard cutout of Dreadbird will snap off causing electrical sparks to go flying, which will then cause a fire. This fire will spread across the wagons and even to Carney himself, which will end the minigame. And then in the FNAF 3 Phaser Blast level, we can see the aftermath of the fire while defending yourself against Springtrap. You'll find the wagons and even Carney himself completely burned with nothing in the attraction left. The Fall Fest fire has actually shown up a few times before here, but here it's the most prominent, and now we can even connect it to the death of a character from Secret of the Mimic. Here we know that MCM was commissioned to work on Fall Fest. We find the same Fall Fest 1970 poster from Help Wanted 2 alongside collectibles from the actual carnival. We find a snow globe from Fall Fest that looks similar to promotional art for the event featuring animatronics and even the puppet as a scarecrow. And we even found an admissions ticket for Fall Fest, something we've never seen before. But most importantly, we learned that Fiona Murray, who was a big focus in this game as M1 or F10 and 4, decided to go to Fall Fest with the installation team because she felt that something was wrong. This trip was supposed to last a week, but as we learn in another voice log, Fiona never returns home and Edwin is forced to raise David completely on his own.
Ed, I hope this message reaches you as soon as you get a break. I have to go help the Fall Fest crew, just for a few days until the installation is finished. It's hard to explain. I just have this terrible feeling like I need to be there so nothing goes wrong, just in case. Trisha will babysit David while I'm gone. I love you both, and I'll be back next week.
But how and why? How did Fiona die at Fall Fest? Well, I believe this game tells us that someone most likely caused a fire, someone we're all familiar with. Throughout the game, we learn how William Afton was slowly sabotaging Edwin's business and slowly taking over his company. We learn things like that William was in contact with a leak from MCM and that William and Fazbear Entertainment kept delaying a project that Edwin was working on for them, the prototype FNAF Location. You can watch this video to find out just how exactly William is successful in taking over Edwin's life. But what if, to make sure of that, that Edwin's life would crumble and he would lose everything, what if William killed Fiona with the Fall Fest fire? William could have been the one to make it seem like something was going to happen somehow at the carnival, which would then force Fiona to go because of a bad feeling. And I think the first piece of evidence is the carousel minigame. In the Jack-O-Moon level, when looking from the outside perspective, we can actually see that the fire started in this barn and then spread out to the rest of the attraction. So what if it was William inside that barn? He would start the fire where no one would be able to see him and would then disappear. Fiona would be somewhere else in the carnival helping the installation team and most likely didn't know a fire started until it was too late. You can also watch this video where I go over how Moon.exe and other lore support this claim. But for one final piece of evidence, in the Carney minigame that I mentioned earlier, in the final level the only thing we see after the fire is Springtrap or William Afton, which would be a way to tell us that he's the only thing that remained and stayed alive after the fire, since he caused it and was able to escape. So as you can probably tell by now, we know so much more about Fall Fest, and Help Wanted 2 alongside information from Secret of the Mimic definitely got us that much closer to solving this event. But at the same time, and like I've said the other times I mentioned this mystery, it still feels like we're missing the specifics and details of Fall Fest, especially because Fall Fest is a yearly reoccurring event. Anything could have happened from 1970 to the late 80s, and Fall Fest could even still be happening in the modern timeline. Many of us, including myself, are still hoping we will get some sort of Fall Fest DLC to Secret of the Mimic, or that it will even be the next mainline game after we return to the Pizzaplex one more time. But until then, although we have so much more information, a lot is still left up in the air, leaving this mystery as just kinda solved. Finally, looking at the last mystery on the list, we have the Secret of the Mimic update released last year that of course connected to Secret of the Mimic. Because you already heard the recap of this update from VAR, let's get straight into how we can solve it. I'd say there are 4 or 5 major reveals in this update that we all had different types of interpretations for at the time, and I think if I made this video before Secret of the Mimic was released, it would definitely have been unsolved. But now I think we can actually answer this list of reveals, starting with the Tiger Rock plushie. This did not mean that the books were canon, even though that's what the majority of the community was arguing. Instead, it told us that elements of the epilogues were taken straight from that story and translated over to the games. Fiona being alive, for example. In the book, she died giving birth to David, but here in the game, she lives for a few years into his childhood before dying at a Fall Fest fire like I mentioned earlier. This tiger plushie actually has its own really cool lore in this game that gives early FNAF Golden Freddy vibes, where many fans believe that this is possessed by David and might still be around in the modern timeline. Now with this circus funhouse, we all assumed that this would be the setting and entrance for this new game, but then in Secret of the Mimic, we had a completely different style of entrance and it's more of a factory than a funhouse. We do see the circus funhouse as a miniature model in Edwin's house, so why was it shown to us here? Well, it could be because it was the old MCM before being remodeled, or that it was planned to be the new MCM before the Mimic would go rogue and stop that from happening. It depends on how you want to look at it, and although we don't have a solid answer for it here, it still showed up in Secret of the Mimic and was teased here as well. With the van in Mexus, this blue van is actually the exact same work van we see Arnold drive in the beginning of this game, not the van that hit David or this van from one of the endings from Security Breach that some of us theorized about. But Mexus being here in the first place was arguably a tease to the computer originating from 1979 like we all thought. Mechanical Form Experimental Storage was a computer created by Edwin to store programs like M1 in the form of F10 and 4, meaning this blue bunny entity is most likely a program on its own that we are still not sure of its origin. This ending also actually showed us the ending of Secret of the Mimic in a non-literal way. When I was live some time ago, Mr. 3D Gaming proposed the idea that this ending was representing Mexus in the form of the blueprint being in the data driver and it being taken away from the manor by Arnold. Arnold does escape with the cradle blueprints in the parachute ending, and it's the thing that the Mimic takes back after stopping him from escaping. So instead of looking at this as something that literally happened, we can instead look at it in a metaphorical sense, where it was showing us the Secret of the Mimic ending where Arnold attempts to escape with the Mexus blueprints, which is why we even see the van drive off in such a hurry just like in the actual ending. So more than a year after this update was released, I think we can confidently explain every single thing revealed to us and how it played out in Secret of the Mimic. We have answers to all of this update, leaving it as 100% solved. So finally we can answer the big question, have we solved Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2? Well, when we followed the same process with Help Wanted, we found that 77% of that game was solved. With FNAF AR, 60% of that game was solved, and with Security Breach that also included the Ruin DLC, only 33% of that game was solved. So with Help Wanted 2, we have 9 total mysteries and 6 of them are solved, meaning 66% of this game has been solved, which is a little bit lower than I was honestly expecting, but still sounds about right. Every game besides Security Breach is in the same range of percentage of the game solved. So I think with a DLC or even a new game, a lot of these games would be closer to fully being solved. But at the same time, it could take way longer than that depending on how many games they have planned for the Mimic arc and in the way they're going to end everything. It could also very easily be possible that we'll never get answers to some of these mysteries, like with something as the FNAF 4 box from the original games. But only time will tell, and I know we're all hoping for a FNAF Help Wanted 3 that either takes place in the Manor or even at Fall Fest. So with that said, we have kinda solved FNAF Help Wanted 2 in this 4th retrospective video to this series. Finally, we have Five Nights at Freddy's Secret of the Mimic, which was released almost a year ago. Now you may have noticed that this section isn't actually a long form video uploaded on the channel previously, and this was for a couple of reasons. For one, it felt weird titling this video something like, was FNAF Secret of the Mimic solved 10 months later, since that just feels like such a short amount of time to make a retrospective video. And two, most of the video would have been the exact same, and that's simply the fact that most of this game is definitely unsolved. With every other game we've talked about, there was at least one project released after it that helped to solve a lot of that game's mysteries, but here we don't even know what the next game after FNAF Secret of the Mimic will look like. Sure, Secret of the Mimic VR was released, where some of us did think that new content would be released, but sadly we got nothing, and that VR port has its own set of problems we won't discuss here. So for this section, let's quickly go over a list of mysteries like we've been doing and why they're all basically unsolved. First, we have the endings and which one is canon. Now like I said, the biggest issue is that we don't have the next game either directly or indirectly showing us which one is canon. Each ending honestly has a group of fans arguing that it's canon, and even if there was a consensus, we could be wrong like with Security Breach. Before Ruin was released, most of the community agreed that the Burn Trap ending was canon and that Ruin would follow Cassie rescuing Gregory and Freddy from Burn Trap or the Blob. But now we know that the Princess Quest ending is canon, so it's definitely way too early to decide which ending is canon and which one leads us to the Mimic being in the sequel in Ruin. Next we have F10 and 4. Now this game revealed to us that Mexis is just a computer that runs programs like F10 and 4, where we also had the option to run Cradle.exe through Mexis. So in Ruin, is the Mexis entity another program? Is it the same Cradle program but modified? Is it the same computer as F10 and 4? Where even is F10 and 4, and what happened to her after any of these endings? As you can tell, there are still a bunch of questions to answer, but I feel like we could see most of these resolved in the next FNAF game where F10 and 4 might even make a reappearance and where we could finally get an answer to what this entity is. Next we have David's death. Now in the books it's pretty straightforward how he died and how this led to the Mimic mimicking David. In the game it's the same concept, except for the fact that David's exact death is left ominous and a mystery. The game shows a lot of importance to the ball that David chased into the road, while at the same time showing importance to the storytime showroom where there might have been an accident with a giant moon prop leading to his death instead. There are also theories where William Afton could have been responsible in order to ensure that Edwin's life would fall apart, allowing him to swoop in and take over his company. All of these have their own evidence and could work really well, but we don't know for certain. I don't necessarily think his death has a major impact on the modern timeline, but solving this mystery would still tell us a lot. I've talked about this next one like 50 times already, but we have Fiona and Fall Fest. We just simply need more. A DLC or an entire new FNAF game could answer what really happened in the greater mystery that is Fall Fest. Next we have the coolest mystery on this list, Moon and what really happened here. This definitely wouldn't change anything, but it would still be nice to know if this is the Mimic or an unfortunate person stuck in this mascot for eternity. Maybe Moon will even show up in the sequel and will become someone chasing Cassie in Ruin 2. Now in a similar category of mysteries we have White Tiger. I think most of us can agree that his appearance is because of David, where his soul could possibly still be an MCM projecting a large version of the White Tiger plushie. That's why we hear a child's laugh in the background when White Tiger shows up on your screen, and why it almost feels like you're playing hide and seek with it. But this still doesn't answer why he can only show up in certain areas and why he doesn't show up anywhere else in the modern timeline. If you believe in the theory that MCM is under the Pizzaplex, then David's soul should still be somewhere around, unless his absence is to tell us that he already moved on and had a happiest day. It's honestly hard to tell, but I hope we see White Tiger again because I feel like there's a lot to be revealed about this character. For the last unsolved mystery, we have Moon.exe. You could honestly talk about this minigame for hours, trying to solve all the different paths, all the different dialogue, the collectibles, all the characters, and what this means for F10 and 4 and M2. You could probably solve Moon.exe just with Secret of the Mimic alone, but even then it's just too soon, and I feel like we all have different ideas of what's really going on. Now with these next mysteries, I would actually label them as kinda solved or solved, since they mainly answer mysteries from past games and how a game that takes place in 1979 is integrated into the already established lore timeline. So we have David's room with Edwin's mansion that probably turns into Dave's room in William Afton's FNAF 4 house, which which would then be on top of the Sister Location bunker that were Edwin's tunnels at the time. We then have the FNAF 1 prototype pizzeria and animatronics alongside prototype springlock animatronics. In probably the coolest reveal of this game, it told us that Edwin was a contractor for Fazbear Entertainment and helped design assets for FNAF 1 and the springlocks. Now where exactly this took place in the timeline and if Edwin really just helped or actually created them all on his own can be debated, but these mysteries have more to do with the original games and their lore, rather than the modern lore, which is the point of this video. So hopefully by now you see that Secret of the Mimic has a long way to go before we can even get near calling this game solved, and I'm confident that the future FNAF will have a large role in that. So to go over the future of the series, here's a very special guest, FM Plus, who has amazing content and has talked previously about reboots and what should happen next, so take it away.
Hey there, I've been invited onto this video to talk about FNAF, obviously. More specifically, I'll be diving into the future of the series and what it could possibly hold. I've done a few videos in the past on rebooting FNAF, along with redesigning certain aspects of it as well, and I'm excited to be able to talk about this topic today. I'd like to start by going into what exactly would be the most likely path forward for the series. After that, I'll go over what I personally think they should do, even if most of my ideas are unlikely. The modern era of FNAF games, that being from Help Wanted to Secret of the Mimic, is a bit controversial, to say the least. A lot of people like the games, a lot of people do not. One thing is pretty clear though, Steelwool and Scott have a story that they want to tell, and that's the story of the Mimic. As we know by Ruin, this story is not yet complete, and that makes it pretty obvious to me where the focus is probably being put currently. Ruin 2, whether another DLC to Security Breach or a new game entirely with a different title, is the most obvious thing that they could be working on right now. It's been radio silence in terms of the mainline games, besides Secret of the Mimic VR I suppose, but there's simply no way that this isn't at the very least planned. We've seen how the Mimic was made and where he came from, and we've seen where he ended up. The one thing missing is what happens now, specifically to Cassie, Gregory, and I believe Vanessa. Does Cassie end up in a buried MCM or somewhere else entirely? I don't have the answers to that, but I do know that we will find out in a game, I suspect sooner rather than later. I'd be genuinely shocked if we didn't get at least a teaser for the continuation of Ruin sometime this year. Other than the very obvious Ruin 2, I find it likely for them to also make a Fredbear's or Fall Fest game at some point. They both somewhat fall into the same category or era of the series, and they feel very connected. The newer games, for the most part, all feature far more focused lore in the sense that the main story of them is very easy to follow and understand. There's still hidden unknowns in each one, Easter eggs and little details that really make you question why they're there in the first place. A great example of this is a noticeable amount of Fredbear's content within these games. Secret of the Mimic had the prototype Springlock suits, and Security Breach had collectible posters. The other games all feature a large amount of Fall Fest stuff. Help Wanted with the DLC, Help Wanted 2 with some of the mini-games, along with it being a major part of the Murray family story in Secret of the Mimic. They've weaved all these hints and clues into every single game they've released, culminating in nearly 7 years at this point of countless references to Fredbear's and Fall Fest. It would only make sense for a game to come out that relates to one or both of these events in the future. I mean, how many of you watching would love to see either or both of these locations more in depth? I bet it's a lot, and Steelwool and Scott know that. A game based in the late 70s or early 80s, possibly going between Fall Fest and Fredbear's, would be the obvious thing for them to do. They could cover them separately in different games theoretically, but they feel related to me in many ways, and I could easily see both being put together into a single experience. I won't get too far into it, but perhaps we learn that Fredbear and Spring Bonnie were originally characters for Fall Fest, before being adapted to the diner due to being so popular. I think a game like this would also need to go deep into William and Henry's relationship, as that's something that we, 1, don't currently have, and 2, have wanted for a while in the community. There is a large chunk of the FNAF fanbase that doesn't exactly enjoy the newer games, and I think that something like this would also bring them back. Those are the two main and very obvious things I believe we will see from FNAF in the somewhat near future. The next things are more so things I would like to see happen, not things that I think are actually likely to happen. The first would be a complete Steel Wool remaster of the original games. I've wanted this for a long time. The OG Scott era FNAF games are not bad by any means. They're all charming and unique in their own ways, and it's where the series began after all. I just think that it's about time we get some kind of remasters of them. It's been 11 years, almost 12 really, since the first game came out. 3D graphics, real-time movement from the animatronics, real 3D environments, quality of life additions, the list goes on. This would be a great way to better preserve those older titles and possibly get new eyes on the series as well. I think specifically a game like Sister Location would benefit the most, as that game actually has movement in it, but I could see them doing it to all the OG games. If done right, these would likely bring in new players and possibly fans of the series and make it a little more approachable. I assume that many of you are longtime fans of the franchise, but think about someone who's interested but never played. Maybe people who got into it because of the movie and that was the first thing they saw of FNAF. And they look at these older games and they're kind of hard to approach, maybe hard to play, less accessible, they kind of run weird on computers. Stuff like that. If they see a well-polished remake of the originals, they'll be more likely to play and probably become fans because, these games are good. They just need a little touch-up here and there to really be great and bring them more into the modern era. To be very clear about this one, I wouldn't want them to change anything about the lore or the story of these games. They do not need to touch anything about that. Simply remastering the games to be more modern would be the idea. They could even add stuff for old players to come back and play these newer games, an endless mode in Pizza Sim, that kind of comes to mind a lot, but they could definitely add other things too. The final couple ideas I want to cover are ones that both mostly do not relate to the games and are, in my opinion, very unlikely to happen anytime soon or at all. They're mostly just things that I'd personally love to see from Five Nights at Freddy's, and I think they would work well with the series, or they're just really cool. The first one of these is an animated episodic show. I have no idea why, but I feel like this would be awesome. We've gotten some live action with the movies, but I think something animated would also be quite cool to see. I think an easy way to do this would be each episode being a different Fazbear's Fright story. For the most part, with a few very notable exceptions, these stories are actually really well done and can stand on their own. I think something like this would help to bring more attention to these stories, as not everyone wants to go and read these books, although they are very cool and if you haven't, you should read them. They don't even have to include some deeper meaning or anything, they can just be short animated episodes of Fazbear's Fright stories. An awesome way to do this would even be to get community members to actually animate these. That would definitely be super duper unlikely, but again, very cool. My final idea for today is movies beyond FNAF 3. I don't want them to just milk the series, of course. However, I do want to see the nightmares on the big screen, so I'm a little torn here. If done right, more movies beyond the third can work well. Whether or not they actually execute it well is another thing. The first two films are not bad by any means, but they could have been better, and we all know this. There are other things that I want to see from this series, like better, more accurate merch, more fanverse games, FNAF World 2, and FNAF multiplayer, but I felt that those things kind of get too far away from the main point of this video, that being the mainline games. I think it's pretty clear that Five Nights at Freddy's has a ton of different ways to move forward, and I think I've covered most of them in this little segment of the video I've made. Huge thanks to Bronze for letting me have a part in this video. If you like this part and what I had to say, go check out my channel, as I have a bunch of videos over there covering many parts of FNAF. Anyways, that's my time. Now back to the rest of the video.
Thank you so much FNAF Merch Plus, and everyone please make sure to go check out their channel. They really do have amazing videos, and they even inspired a future video coming up either next week or the week after that. But personally, I just want anything Fall Fest related. I feel that this carnival event can almost be squeezed into any already existing project like a FNAF Help Wanted 3 or a Ruin 2 project, where the first half of this game could take place in the Pizzaplex while the second half of it could follow Cassie escaping and wandering into Fall Fest. But only time will tell, and really I'm just excited about the future FNAF and the next possible game. But now I want to look at some bonus mysteries for each of these games that I honestly forgot about, or mysteries that I decided to add based on comments. Starting with FNAF Help Wanted, and a mystery I don't really see many people talk about: who is the client that sent Silver Parasol Games the old circuit boards, and who snuck into their offices trying to get it back? We all know that Tape Girl worked for Silver Parasol Games, a development team that worked on the VR Help Wanted game, so take a listen to one of the tapes left behind and just how exactly it alludes to a mysterious character that we still don't know about.
The drawers have been emptied out. Someone was here. I don't think it was spring cleaning either. No, there was plastic on the floor. Someone was definitely here during the night. It had to have been the client. I mean, they sent us that stuff in the first place with no explanation, told us to scan it, said it would expedite the process so we wouldn't need to program any pathfinding ourselves. It was a budget thing, I guess. It was just junk. Circuit boards and things like that. Looked pretty old. Somehow, though, there was usable code on some of it. It seemed to take hold by itself. Things started changing. But then, he started appearing. At least that's what Jeremy said.
Really, we have two things to answer: who the client is and who snuck in. I think for the longest time we all assumed that the client was some higher up for Fazbear Entertainment that is somehow helping William to come back through Glitchtrap. And it could have been someone like Vanny, who has always been helping Glitchtrap. However, there are a few issues here. These circuit boards were sent to the development team before Vanessa became Vanny, because Glitchtrap hadn't been scanned into the VR game yet. And why would Vanny go after the circuit boards if William had already successfully come back? Well, instead, as of right now, I think it's more possible that the client is what was left of MCM from Secret of the Mimic. We know Fazbear Entertainment essentially absorbed MCM and all of its assets, so it could have been anyone from Fazbear sending over old circuit boards to actually speed up the process, not knowing what would happen. And the person going after them would be none other than Edwin Murray. If these circuit boards contain the Mimic chip that would then manifest into Glitchtrap, Edwin would probably be one of the only people who knows that, causing him to break into the building only to find nothing. We have no idea if Edwin lived after being attacked by the Mimic, but if he did, he could still be around and could even have a role in the Pizzaplex like he did in the novels. MCM adds a whole new layer to the lore and even explains some of the random animatronics in Security Breach, so why couldn't what's left of MCM be the client? But if Edwin didn't sneak in, other possibilities that still work range from Michael Afton to even Miss Afton. It's already a popular theory that Michael is still alive and is either working for or is against Fazbear Entertainment, so he would know what the circuit boards would contain and would want them back before going back to his room. A good friend of mine, unnamed Security Guard, who you heard earlier in the Security Breach segment, is probably the biggest advocate to Miss Afton still being alive. Similar to Michael, she would want to stop the circuit boards from being used, but it's too late. Now, this mystery doesn't define if Help Wanted is solved or anything like that, but it can definitely allow for older or newer characters to come back in the next game or DLC. I hope it's Edwin still being alive, but only time will tell. We're definitely way closer to solving this mystery with the release of Secret of the Mimic, but we still don't have a definitive answer, leaving who snuck in is kinda solved. Now, with FNAF AR, I honestly feel like we covered everything this game had to offer. It is a much shorter game than the other games mentioned, and I didn't want to add a mystery just for the sake of adding one. So we'll keep it as it is for now and add all the mysteries to the final calculation soon. With FNAF Security Breach, let's go over a mystery that I actually made an entire video on, a mystery that tackles the idea of souls in possession still having a major role in the modern lore. So the first thing we need to establish is that there are probably souls around the Pizzaplex from new murders and disappearances separate from the original games. During one of the endings of Security Breach, it is revealed that there are at least 9 missing residents, who most likely disappeared at the Pizzaplex. This was probably at the hands of Vanny or Glitchtrap for a number of reasons that we could all debate about, but the paper highlights how they have continued to disappear, so there could even be more disappearances that weren't shown here. Of course, we also have the tales from the Pizzaplex novels, which I know we all have our opinions on, but in almost every single story there is some sort of death that should be around the Pizzaplex. Like all the construction workers who were murdered by the Mimic down in the FNAF 6 Pizzeria, or really anyone the Mimic has murdered, so where are they? I definitely don't think they just moved on, since every other time in the franchise there was a murder, their soul would have some significant role, so why would they just be ignored here? Well, they've actually been right in front of our faces this entire time. They've been in animatronics with no escape. They've been trapped inside these wet floor bots. No, I'm not kidding, the dozens of souls in the Pizzaplex are in these small vessels forever. To prove this, we need to look at the Ruin DLC in Glamrock Bonnie. We all know the mystery behind Glamrock Bonnie's disappearance played a huge role throughout Security Breach, where we finally got an answer in the Ruin DLC, where he was found destroyed in Bonnie Bowl surrounded by wet floor bots, but what's important is how we got here. Before reaching Bonnie Bowl, you can find the same wet floor bots we've been talking about scattered around the ruined Pizzaplex. They look and behave the exact same they did in Security Breach, except for when you wear the Vanny mask, where you now have an option to deactivate them. But take a listen to the sound effect that plays whenever you get near them. That's right, what you're hearing is crying or screaming from these children. I definitely think these are the screams of the children from the missing posters in the newspaper, or it could even be any murdered children from the novels. This actually works really well and is pretty tragic when you think about it. These are souls trapped inside mainly stationary objects, being forced to watch people enter and leave, having fun at the Pizzaplex. They can't even scream for help as no one would hear them. All they can do is accept the fact that they are stuck, at least until Ruin. As I said, we can deactivate these caution bots, which causes them to glitch or malfunction before shutting down. Now, I think most of us can agree that this is Cassie freeing the souls inside these bots, allowing them to move on. We're giving them their happiest days, which I know is pretty different from what we've seen before, since you usually need a fire and a couple of more steps. But the reason we couldn't set them free in Security Breach, and the reason we still hear screams, is their connection to the Vanny network. Now, this could be for a number of reasons, like that Vanny murdered these children while on the Vanny network, or that their souls are tied to this network and not the real world. But whatever it is, I think it's clear the key to free them was the Vanny mask, and you actually need to deactivate 28 of these floor bots to find Bonnie. This could honestly tell us that they were 28 victims, which is kinda crazy to think about since we only had a max of 5 to 10 victims in the original FNAF games. But after finding them all, you'll be able to find a destroyed Glamrock Bonnie with an additional 4 caution bots surrounding him. Bonnie's eyes are glowing yellow, so in order to deactivate him, you first need to deactivate the last 4 bots. After doing so, the glow in Bonnie's eyes will also fade away, as if we are also setting him free, which is weird to think about since previously I don't really think any of us were theorizing that he was possessed by someone. But this minigame may remind you of Give Gifts, Give Life from FNAF 2, or even the Springlock minigame from FNAF 3, where you have 4 or 5 souls being surrounded or surrounding someone. Here, these 4 souls are almost acting as protectors over the remains of Bonnie, as if he was possessed by someone, he would no longer be able to move or really reach the other souls. I really like Raito's video where he suggests that Bonnie is being possessed by Cassie's dad, and he goes over evidence I recommend you all check out in the full video. So I do believe these 4 souls are acting as protectors over Bonnie after he was destroyed by Monty, or the opposite, where Bonnie can't move on until they do. But most importantly, I think it's pretty undeniable that these bots are possessed and that they're non-violent. Finally, looking at FNAF Help Wanted 2, and a mystery I totally forgot about until after I uploaded the video, we have Old Man Consequences. This character has a pretty long history that I won't entirely go over here. I instead just want to look at his appearances in the modern games, where he mainly appears in the Princess Quest minigames as the Old King. He's actually the one to give the princess the Sword of Light that she uses in Princess Quest 2 and 3. Then in Help Wanted 2 he had a huge role, where he was the one to trade the player the Glitch Trap plushie that Vanessa would destroy for the Vanny mask. Now who he is aside just for a moment, this means OMC was in possession of the last piece of Glitchtrap's code. So if you believe Glitchtrap is William Afton, this would make perfect sense, since Old Man Consequences would be in possession of what's left of William Afton. You could even argue that there's some overlapping possession to the Glitchtrap virus, so OMC would have the last bits to William's soul. This could make OMC anyone from Henry to Michael, being the thing to stop William once again. Or if you believe Glitchtrap is the Mimic, it works just as well. The remains of the Glitchtrap code would be in possession by the person who created it, by the person who knows the Mimic best, Edwin Murray. I'd say this is one of the most popular theories around OMC currently, that he is actually Edwin, which changes a lot around his character and even Princess Quest. For example, there are these great videos going over all the evidence that you should totally check out. Honestly, I feel like we are closer to solving this character, but ultimately it might never actually happen, and all we might have are connections between characters solving other mysteries. So for that reason, because we can make some solid connections, Old Man Consequences remains as kinda solved. So finally, to end this 2.5 hour long video, let's go over the final calculations. Here we have 51 total mysteries from the 5 games. 22 of these mysteries are solved and 29 of them are unsolved. So dividing 22 by 51 and then multiplying it by 100 to get our percentage, drumroll please. 43.14% of the modern lore has been solved. So, have we solved the modern Five Nights at Freddy's lore 6 years later? No. Honestly, 43% is definitely not enough to say we've even solved majority of the lore, but does the number sound right? Well, when comparing it to the original games, when the 5th game or Sister Location was released, how much of that lore was solved? I'd say 50% also sounds right. FNAF 4 and Sister Location were games that were more unsolved back then with more mysteries, while FNAF 1 and 3 were considered solved, and FNAF 2 was kinda solved, so it's about right. With 1 or 2 more games, I think we'll get way closer to solving the majority of these games. This could be Ruin 2, and then a big finale game wrapping everything up. But with that said, this was my big retrospective video on whether or not we've solved the modern Five Nights at Freddy's lore. So what do you guys think? How much of these games have we solved, and will we ever solve some of these mysteries? Comment down below any thoughts or theories, as I love reading through the comments. So please consider hitting that like and subscribe button, and thank you all so much for watching. Bye!